All right. Good morning. Good afternoon. We are live for bLU Talks. Amplify your message. Day number 2. Hello, Laura. Good morning. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon and good evening for those who are in the evening or
Yes.
in the middle of the night if you're in Australia. We do have some people who do join us from Australia.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
man, the times of day that they stay up to be with this community are just shouting love out to all of our Australian people.
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah,
there are several. Sarah Willoughby always comes to mind. She never misses, and it's
love her.
always 2 or 3 in the morning, and sometimes the thing that we're doing is 4 or 5 hours long, and she's like gets up. She's there from 2 till 6 AM and has kids and a life, and I'm always impressed. Yeah.
Yep, always.
Awesome. Well, we have got another superstar lineup of guests today, and I'm super excited to have our first one, Tracy. And what I'm going to do is bring Tracy on right now, and let's get this party started. Tracy Valko, hello. How are you?
Hello. I'm doing very good.
That's awesome. And of course, as everybody knows, Coach Scotty here. I'm a personal trainer, and I'm from Sylvan Lake, Alberta. And Miss Laura Lake is an amazing facilitator, and she is from way out in Nova Scotia. And where are
Only
you
the
from,
people
Tracy?
from the country tend to say it like that.
I know. Where are you at, Tracy?
I'm actually Kitchener, Ontario.
Kitchener,
Oh,
Ontario.
nice.
There you go. Well, Tracy, welcome to the show. Can you please tell us about yourself? What it is you do to make the world a better place?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, thank you so much, Scotty and Laura, for having me on. This is great. I always like platforms like this just to kind of explain like our journey. I think all of us have a story and everybody can have some, lessons right in life from everybody's experiences. So I am a mortgage broker and founder of my brokerage, Valko Financial. I've been in the industry. I say 26 years, but I've actually been in the industry, I'm going to say 50 years because since I was born, my parents were in the banking industry. So
Mm.
it's just, I grew up around it. And I always said when I was little, oh, I'd never be in the banking industry. And there you go. I'm on the mortgage side, right? So, I started in the industry as a solopreneur myself and, building that business, that's a huge story in itself. You don't go to university and get taught how to be a successful
Mhm.
entrepreneur. You kind of have to learn these skills as you go, right? And I've had the brokerage now 5 years, and I'm licensed now right across the country in Canada. So, and we've got over 70 agents and brokers over the last 2 years. It's been pretty incredible to see the growth that we've had.
Wow.
Okay. So the biggest question on my mind right now is I'm looking to buy a house in the new year. Is it going to get scarier?
Well, I'm always an optimist. And the opportunity right now to buy it, actually they say, well, it's not even a seller's or buyer's market, but
Mhm.
I absolutely believe it's a buyer's market. Values have come down this year,
Mhm.
but realistically, you've got to look at the last 2 years. We went through a pandemic.
Oh, yeah.
We had the supply chain on the housing market, the activity of selling and buying was 4 times what you would have in just 1 year last year. So
Mhm.
what we're seeing is not a crash in the housing market in 2022. We're seeing a reallocation of activity, right?
Ah,
So what that means is that values have come down about 20-25% in some areas, some 20, some 25, and some.
not here.
But if you think about it, we went up 50% in 2 years, right? So realistically, if you look back prior to these 2 years, traditionally the normal market is 3 or 4% increase year over year on values. So we're still up like 25% in most areas, which we would have never historically seen. And
Mhm.
this is where we have to understand, if people understand the stats and the history of the housing market, it would calm their mindset down. And then the expectation of buying would actually be, I think, elevated because the opportunity is huge right now. While we have a pocket of values that are down, because
Mhm.
what's happened is we're 1.5 million homes short in Canada. Like that stat's out there. That's not going away when we have 500,000 new immigrants coming into Canada every year. That's what the government has mandated. And just alone in my area in Kitchener Waterloo, which is about 45 minutes, just to give you perspective, from the GTA, so Toronto, so it's very commutable. And most people work online, to be honest now. It's very
Yeah.
hybrid, right? We've had 28,000 new immigrants in the last 8 months come into our community. So where are we housing people when there's a housing supply? So what I'm saying in that is that values are going to go up in 2024. I truly believe in 2025, just like what we had in 2021. So your pocket of buying and most people is going to be in 2023.
Oh, yeah, we're out by the end of April. So and I mean, I asked this question because yes, COVID has been crazy. Yeah, I want to learn more about what you do just to give you a sense of the market here. And I don't want to get too much into it because I want to learn about you.
Yeah.
But housing costs or prices have at least doubled and the average has tripled. Some have quadrupled in the last 2 years here in Halifax because our vacancy rate is barely over 0%.
Yeah.
It's like 0.1%. So I'm like, oh my God, this is the
Well, this is the thing. I've always been an advocate for affordable home ownership. I've also been an advocate to make sure people have fair choices and options. Like I've been on a lot of boards with our mortgage association. I've done advocacy with the government and with the federal government in terms of changing a lot of the mortgage rules out there because affordability is becoming really hard in Canada to own a home. So that's where my passion is. I always say it's not the number and it's not the rate or the mortgage. It's about the people first. Like I'm more in the people business. I just happen to do mortgages.
So
Right.
where did that heart come from of you being in the people business, not the mortgage business?
You know, I really like, I know I'm an empath. That's for sure. Yeah, I've always been very connected. In fact, you know, when I built this, but I knew two people in my community. I knew my grandparents, I should say three, I'm sorry, my grandparents and my husband. And I built the business just door knocking and talking to people and getting that experience. I mean, back then you could go into apartment buildings and just knock on doors and have conversations. And I really realized very early that people just want to be heard, right? They just want to be validated and they want somebody to not only listen to them, but be able to provide some hope in their life, right? For opportunity. And I learned that very quickly that the gift of my ability was the gift of conversation and being able to talk to me in an open and very, I think more embracing form where people feel trust with me, right? Because I don't hold judgment. I never have. People could be, have $200,000 worth of debt or could have no debt. I don't judge that because I think everybody has a story and your bank account looks different than mine. And I'm very good to know when I look at a bank account, I can see where people's trigger rates are, like where they're at in terms of their trauma or their triggers. And I'm able to help them, right, holistically. And I think that I don't think a lot of people in my industry can do that. So it's not an ego perspective. It's just, I think that was my gift from God to kind of service people. Because a lot of people, when they get to know me, they say, why are you in the mortgage business? Like you should be a therapist or you should be a speaker and talk about, because when you speak, people listen. And I said, well, I think that I've been put into the mortgage forum as a platform to be able to help people in this space. Right.
Yeah.
So I think that's why I've grown the brokerage to where I have. If you talk to any of the agents and brokers that are with us, what do they say? Well, they say, honestly, it's like family. It's like coming home. They've never been in a space where it's, more communicative. It's more transparent. It's more heart centered. Right. And we truly try to look at people and raise them up to the next level. And it's not, again, about the mortgage. It just comes secondary because there's so many mortgage people out there. There's like banks, there's financial institutions, and then there's the broker space. But what do you do different? Well, my difference is that and it's actually, you know what? It's not complicated. We just seem to make it complicated in life. Like life is about serving and supporting people. It really is. We just seem to make it complicated. We bring in our ego. We bring in, too much overthinking. We think what we think people think, and we don't actually get out of the way of that. I always say that, like, I'm very much into Japanese terminology, and I use this concept. I talk about a lot when I speak. I actually did it in one of my last speaking forums last week, and it's the concept called Aikiai. And it's the intersection between what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs, and how you make money. Right? It's the bliss, purpose, and intention behind everything you do. It's the reason why you get up in the morning. It's your whole purpose of being. And so when you get out of your head, get out of your way, and you do what you love, right? That's when you bring the exceptional people, opportunities, experiences, and changes in people's life. And I think a lot of people, it takes them longer to find out what that Aikiai is. When you do, right, then just everything starts to full circle. Not that you're not going to have road bumps, because I truly think life is about struggle, Most people think, oh no, there's about like, you have to find that big win. It's, but no, life is struggle. But what's your struggle? You're gonna struggle at what you love, or you're gonna struggle at not having anything. So you might as well struggle at what you try to love, right? And get through it, right? So that you can be the best version of yourself. So I think that I really teach a lot of that to my clients. And I have so many people come back to me just to have conversation back, because they need that kind of their bucket full again, right? Of being able to have conversation in a non-judgmental form, because financing can be so judgmental. You can think the best of somebody, right? And then if you look at, and they say, oh, well, look at me, I've got this debt and I've got this and this has happened. You can, and in the back of your mind, then your ego sets in like, oh my God, these people are a mess. They don't really know what they're doing. They're not of integrity, when they probably are the best that they can be given the situation they've been.
Mm-hmm. I think Scott and I can both attest to that one. It's like life is going good, you're getting somewhere, and then all of a sudden it just throws a road or a telephone pole in your way. We were both in bicycle accidents. And then, like, of course, with any sort of accident, there's definitely that financial piece.
Yeah.
And it really, truly sets you back. But you can't plan that well for something like that. You can plan a little bit here and there, but things happen.
They do.
Yeah, there's so many layers here too that I'd love to unpack. A lot of them, like what Laura's just dovetailing on too. It's interesting, as solopreneurs or entrepreneurs, it's a different game. Like getting a mortgage even is when you go to the bank and they say, what's your annual income? And you're like, well, I'm a solopreneur. Like I brought in this much, but I run my own business. So I had all these expenses and then I paid my staff. And then like, well, it says you made 0 last year. Well, yeah, but that's because the accountants do their cartwheels with the numbers to make it like that's, I didn't I did pay myself, honestly. Well, it doesn't say here on line 743 of your return, doesn't say you made anything. Well, okay, but so getting a mortgage as a solopreneur is a different game.
It
And
is. It's
that's
so
where having
complicated.
that's where having a mortgage broker is really, for me, it's always been essential because, well, not always, but for the longest time, because I don't fit in the check boxes of the bank.
No. And
Right?
most people don't, to be honest. Like the traditional way of getting paid, where you get a salary income, is becoming more and more dilute. Especially COVID's changed, I think, the trajectory of income in Canada, of how people receive their income. I know so many people that are working full-time jobs, 3 jobs full-time, because they're doing their business, they're working full-time, let's say at a company, but then they're doing their own business, and then they're doing maybe a podcast, or they're doing other stuff online, maybe a website where they've got some type of skill set that they're able to, like, there's so many multitudes of income coming in. The banks, and well, I'm going to say back to the government, hasn't changed their legislation enough on mortgage rules to accommodate for change. So what's happening is the private sector of financing is becoming increasingly more profitable for the private sector, because people are having to fit in that box of having to pay more money because they're not fitting in the banks or credit unions or financial for best rates. And then you've got values that are still up high. Like, you still have to take in consideration, values are still, back from 2019, they're up 25, if not 30% in some areas. Like, that's crazy. Like, that really is. We're the only country in the world that had values go up. Why do you think we're seeing what we're seeing this year in the housing correction? Like, we have to all take a deep breath. I say to everybody too, the other thing I say is COVID, we all suffer PTSD.
Oh, yes.
100%. Do not tell me you don't. We all do to some degree. And what does that do in terms of conversation? Do we not say, like, we also say, where people are working harder, but they're not producing more, right? And they're working harder because they're still in their mind trying to process what we've gone through. I mean, 2 years ago, we didn't even know if we were going to make it the next day, what the world was going to look like. How do we think we recovered from this? Just coming out of COVID doesn't mean that we've forgotten about it. We're just not dealing for it. We've got a health crisis. We've got a mental health crisis in Canada, right?
Yeah.
Right? Now we've got a housing crisis. Everything has crisis at the end of it. And then I'm supposed to have a really lovely conversation with a first-time home buyer couple to buy a house. Like, we have to learn to be educated on how to be able to deal with conversation, not only with our clients, but with each other. right now, right? And how to support people through this transition of getting through PTSD, because PTSD, you can recover, right?
Mhm.
It just takes time, and it takes the right type of behavior and therapy and conversation, but we're going to have to learn it as a society. We
Oh,
can't.
definitely. That's why they switched it from PTSD, which stands for those who don't know, post traumatic stress disorder, to PTSR, which is post traumatic stress response.
Yeah.
To let
Mm.
people know that it's not one of those necessarily lifelong, life ending things. There is something that you can do about it. It's a response. So how do we take steps
Exactly.
to make that bridge to start healing? Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's really fascinating too, in my mind, with the work that you do.
Mhm.
I know for all the times I've bought a house, for me, a lot of the things going on was I had to have faith in stability of the world, of the government, of the system, because I was committing 20 years at this. It was 5 years at this rate, but 20 years at this thing. It's a big commitment. You need to know that the foundation is stable and secure. And we realized our government is not stable. They're not secure. I'm going to say they're not even sane. And so that you're right. Post-traumatic stress response was huge, because all of a sudden it's like, I thought there were rules in place. You're not following them. And that's unsettling. So when you're about to step into a mortgage and a big decision, that's concerning, or can be. And so I think that what you do that's beyond is so critical now, because it's about trying to show people a perspective. Like, look, this too shall pass. This will correct, and we're gonna be okay. Um, like, I feel like that's a big part of what you do, yeah?
Oh, 100%. Like, I just did a educational forum to realtors yesterday, and I said this too, like, we have to, as an industry, have a different conversation and reteach people how to look at the housing market. We're not going to be able to get the media to stop with the propaganda of negativity. Like, if you look at it every day, actually, the stat in Canada is 71% of Canadians, the first thing they look at on the news is about the housing market crisis. And they look at 3 articles. And then we're getting into us in the industry trying to deal with people in the housing market. No wonder right now we're at a standstill and things aren't moving. Like, in my community alone, the last month we only sold 496 homes. That's the lowest ever, ever,
Mm,
ever. Right? Where, in the highest in March of this year would have been the highest. We sold like 1,200. Now that's like
mm,
exceptionally high, but you see, it's like feast or famine right now, because of it's all contributing to government propaganda, right? So we have, as a society and as an industry, we have an obligation to reteach how to look at the housing market. The stats are there. The rates have come down, values have come down. In fact, mortgage payments, when I break it down, are lower than what you would have paid back in March at the peak of values, because people are getting in at lower price points. They have to have less down payment, mortgage amounts less. Even though the rate's gone up, the payment actually ends up being about $50 less if you purchase for 600,000. So the opportunity there is to buy. We have to retrain people to look at that there is optimism. And I always say this, no matter what market we're in, no matter what recession we've been in Canada, the market 100% recovers. It just takes time, right?
yeah, and that's huge too. I remember, and sorry, I'll jump in because I think it supports exactly what you're saying. When I graduated college in architecture, Laura and I have that in common. I did architecture for 13 years. When I graduated architectural college and I went to my first job and my first firm, Killick Metz Bone Rose Architects, and I had this man that was my boss. Right away, we bonded. I was like, man, he is such a great guy. He almost kind of became like a surrogate father to me in some, not, but he was a very much a father figure. My dad died when I was 16, and here I am. I'm just turned 20, and this guy is amazing, and I'm really looking up to him. And I said to him, I said, Dan, if you were me and you're 20 years old, like just turned 20, and you're starting fresh, what would you do differently? And he says, I would buy a house right now. Stop wasting your money on rent, making somebody else rich. Buy a house right now. And I thought, holy crap, how can I afford a house? And you know what? I got a real estate agent, and I found a house for $38,500. It was an old, built in the 40s farmhouse. The foundations had cracks, but they were solid enough, and the walls had old shredded like newspaper and sawdust for insulation that had sagged, and you could, those frost lines at the high. It doesn't matter. It was a house, and it was 38.5. And I paid 11.75% interest. And I remember the banker saying, "Oh, 11.75. We haven't seen numbers this low in a long time. You better lock in. It's never going below 11.75."
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, this is great. I locked in. 11.75 is insane now, right? But I look back at my life now, and I'm 53, and everything's great. Like we're in a phenomenal position in that sense now. And I've subsequently owned 6 houses, buy and sell, buy and sell, buy and sell. We had a couple of rentals for a while, that kind of thing. And I think the point I'm trying to make is get in the game.
Exactly.
Get in the game. It will never be better. It will never be easier. It will never be perfect. Get in the game. The interest rates are going to come up. They're going to go down. They're going to change. I've paid 11.75. I've paid 3.5. It doesn't matter. Get in the friggin' game. Does that make sense?
But this is why, and I love you, so you need to go on tour with me. So the thing is, what we're dealing with, there is a generation out there of homeowners that have only seen low interest rates. So they've seen at the peak of it, probably 2.5. And at the lowest, they've seen like 1.45. Wow. They've never seen, so anything over that, they built their life around this low interest rate, right? So here's the problem. We're up to, which is 4.89, which you and I and Laura probably can test. We're like doing the happy dance, like 4.89, that's good. Like when I first got in the mortgage, when I first got my first mortgage, the rate was 7.89. I was happy. I remember what my parents paid. They paid 22%, right? So I understand, like,
yes.
I get it. Everybody's gonna say, well, life was cheaper back then, but it's all cyclical depending on when you're living in that rate. Like you're living in that lifestyle, you're still paying what needs to be paid out on food and gas and whatever. So it's all relational depending on what you're dealing with. So here's the thing. We have to get out of the mindset that these rates can't stay as low as what they did. People are making more money now. They can accommodate, right, this rate fluctuation. And this is the reality of where rates should be. Rates should be sitting at about 4%, 3 point. That's a healthy market. That means inflation's in check. So people have to be realistic. We're just dealing with a lot of its mindset and a lot of generation where they've never seen these high. Like if they talk to Scotty, what you just said, they go, "Oh my God, I would just be out of the housing market. It wouldn't work." But that's the reality. Like 11 to 12% is a private mortgage right now. And there's a lot of people paying that right now.
Good to know. Good to know. Because I'm comparing everything to the first time I bought, which was a duplex, which we sold 10 years ago. And that we were so lucky. There was about a 6-month window where we could actually get a mortgage. And it was a 40-year mortgage at, I think it was 5.54%. And at that point, I do remember it being a low percentage.
Yeah.
But it made sense to buy the house because we were paying so much for rent. We're like, what's $10 extra a month to buy something that we own versus paying for rent where we don't even get to paint the walls?
Yep. And here's the thing. I love what you said. It said, get in the game, Scotty, because what you listen. So I see this too. The people that sold their house between November last year and March, whether it's an investment property or went to relocate. Like I had a lot of people that sold here in Kitchener, Ontario, and then relocated out east, Laura, where you're at, and bought their house free and clear. Because guess what? People won the lottery between November and March of last year selling your house because you sold at top dollar, especially like February, March, top dollar. A lot of people made, there was houses here that sold that were 400,000 to 500,000 over and above list price. That was already elevated.
Yep.
You're winning the lottery. I don't think people understand. So if you didn't get in the game on real estate, how would you have won the lottery? Do you not think that's going to come around again? Of course it is. Look how many people are coming into the country. We are not building enough to keep up with the supply. It's economics 101, right? The supply is needed. Demand's going to need. Values are going to, we're already starting to see we're at the bottoming out of pricing, and we're going to start to slowly see values go up and up and up again. It's just going to take time next year as this recovers and inflation comes down, which it's going to. the economy overall is slowing down. So what's going to happen is this boom of housing pricing is going to start last quarter of next year and well into 2024, 2025. If you didn't buy real estate, we're going to be the people that sat on the side and didn't buy are going to be going, oh my God, you know what? When Tracy talked to me and I should have bought back at, in 2022 and I didn't. Look, you got to get in the game. How do people make money and build? Yes, you can do it on GICs and diversifying, but you're never going to make what you can make on real estate.
Ooh, so I was reading a couple news article titles. I didn't even read the news articles because I'm like, I don't know what's going on. But this term kept coming up called house hacking. I don't know what that is. What is that?
Oh, I have to tell you, caught me on that one because I didn't see. Honestly, I don't. I have to take a look at that.
Okay, because it seems to be it seems to be a new term, and I think if I'm reading it in context correctly with just the titles, I think it has to do with making money from your property, but it could be more than that. I don't know.
I'll be honest, you've caught me on that. Must be a new, like, I mean, I'm hearing stuff all the time.
It is new, yeah.
I think that, like, the government's looking at trying to tighten more rules up because they don't want people to buy a house right away and then list it and not keep it because we're in such short supply. So they're talking about, like, if you have an investment property, you can't sell it within the first year because if you do, you get charged capital gains. So I'm pretty sure that hacking has to do with people trying to do a quick turnover on a house or buy a house and then leave it vacant. Like a lot of people that were buying internationally, right?
Yep.
I got it. I pulled it up. So house hacking is basically buying a property with the intention of having renters cover your mortgage. So it's popular among millennials who see it as the only means of being able to afford a home. So house hackers live in the home, but rent out the upper floor or the basement to cover their mortgage.
So well, that's an interesting that it's called that because to me, that just makes common sense. So I wouldn't call that house hacking.
But it's trendier. It's a trendy term, right?
That's interesting one. See that, but look at the negative connotation on that. So some people and first time into the housing markets would say, oh my God, I can't do this. And when that's probably the smartest thing you could do right now, given how expensive it is.
Yeah.
In terms of being able to, like, everything's gone up in prices, right? Our heat, our hydro, property taxes are going up. So I understand why you need to have renters in, like a lot of places out in BC, having multiple families into one property because houses there are like their average price is 1.2 million. How are you not, as a first time home buyer entering the market, not going to have other renters in there, right? They actually have mortgage helpers. So they have other people that are not related to them that will end up being an investor in that property. I mean, that's normal there. That to me isn't really, that's not house hacking. That's actually common sense, being able to help get into the housing market.
It's funny. It's just smart. And it's funny for us as Canadians who've lived in, like, I'm third or fourth generation Canadian or whatever. We're so used to the way it has been. You buy a little house, then you buy a bigger house, you buy a bigger house, you buy a bigger house. And I have friends that are from other countries and stuff, and they've moved into Canada. And I remember one friend, his name was Indigit, and I was like, wow, your family's done so well. They're like, you've done so well. Like, you guys own big, beautiful homes, and you're like, you guys seem to be pretty rich. And he's like, yeah. And I was like, it's so credible. And I'm always curious, how did you do that? He says, well, when my grandparents moved to Canada, they brought with them their uncles and their cousins and their relatives, but they all pooled together and they bought a pretty nice sizable house, and they had 8 families living in that house, and they all had full-time work, and they all hammered the mortgage.
Yeah.
And then as soon as they hammered the mortgage, then they bought another really big, beautiful house, and then 4 of the family moved out. Now there's 4 in this house and 4 in that house, and they all 8 hammered mortgage, and then they bought another house, and then now it's 3 and 3, and they hammered the mortgage, and then some moved out, and now all of a sudden, it doesn't take long, 15-20 years, and every family owns a $2-3 million home, no mortgage. That's just smart.
That's the way it's smart, but I don't think that, and I'm not saying this, I'm not making a generality, but I just don't think that that's been a lot of what the culture has been in Canada, right?
Exactly.
It just hasn't been like, you know, we have you could, you know, let's just use a family of 4, which has been traditionally, right, you know, the parents and then 2 children, and then as they start, you know, once they get through university, then they get full-time jobs, then they both go off and they can purchase. I mean, that's the way it's kind of traditionally been, but it actually makes more sense to have had them stay in together, more pay off the house for the parents, right? Like together, and then diversify, pull out some equity and be able to buy another home, and then they move on. Like, I think from a debt perspective, we would have been better off as a country to do something like that, where we stayed more together, more as generations of families. And I think we're coming into that circle now, but we're getting forced into that circle now.
Yes.
Right? It's not where it's going to be. And I'm seeing a lot of parents having to readjust their lifestyle and where they want to be in terms of retirement, because they're now having to backtrack and be able to pull money out for their kids to be able to purchase a house that, I mean, I have a 26-year-old. Do you think I want my 26-year-old to own a house that's $1 million? I don't want that stress on him. Like, in fact, there's a generation out there right now that's just like, you know what, owning a house is just not something I even want to even look at. It's too stressful. I'm not resilient enough. I'm just going to live life. I'll either stay with my parents or rent something, and I'll go travel and do what I want. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing either. Like, maybe there's some, I think, life, you know, skill set. There's life lessons in doing that. But I think, to your point, if you have family together, being able to work together towards paying off debt and building, at the end, you're far better off through generations than what we've done for a lot of us here in Canada, right? But I don't think we had the educational tools. Like, when I went to school, no one talked about mortgages. No one talked about financial debt or financial obligations or budgeting. Like, that didn't even happen when my son went to school. It was when my daughter, she's 21, they started bringing it in at the end. Like, we had to teach them. It's just being brought in now to the schools. We're so far back on financial literacy that it's set us back as a country, right? And now you've got values going up. We're dealing with inflation. I mean, we're dealing with global issues as well. Like, you know, we're dealing with, this is what perplexes me on inflation, is you've got gas companies and food companies in the $1 billion of profits right now. Historically, they've never seen, yet our industry and both of those have gone up in terms of our price points for us as Canadians, and probably in the world, to be honest, than we've ever seen before. Why is that? Like, why should that not have been distributed in terms of, instead of it being profit for the food companies or the gas companies, it should have been distributed to bringing the food over or the preparation of it, if we're dealing with true inflation. Yeah. So I think that it's a hard one I'm having a hard time understanding why that's happening. So I can't imagine the individual that's not in the financial sector and just trying to buy a home saying, what am I supposed to do? Like, I see all this and inflation's high and I don't even know what to do because prices just keep on going up and my paycheck keeps on getting less and less and less and less, right? So we have to, I think, be able to change that conversation around, provide people the opportunity for the long game on this, which is values will go up and your equity and your savings is going to be in that house. You're not going to see it today, but you'll see it in 12 months. You'll see it in 18 months. You'll see it in 24 months, right?
And so you say that you speak to people. Is that what you talk on? Like, do you speak to high school kids? Do you speak to companies or people, or teaching them how mortgages work and how to plan, how to prepare, or what things to do? Like, what is your main topic there when you speak?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I do a lot of speaking on a couple of topics. One is obviously on the mortgage side and talking to people about making sure that they understand they have to have, you know, that financial understanding and literacy to really get that ground, you know, floor understanding before you even buy a house. Like, you got to know your budget. If you don't know your budget, you don't know where you're going, right? So I do a lot of speaking on that to schools. I've gone to universities to do a lot of speaking there. And there I really talk a lot about women entrepreneurship. So as a woman being in the financial industry, where it was less than 10% women, what that looked like, and the struggles that I've had in this industry to kind of get ahead. And, you know, I'm 51 and where I'm at and, you know, where I think I could have been, you know, not given all these barriers, but I think barriers kind of give you life lessons and make you more resilient than ever. Right. So I talk a lot on that so that I can give a lot of women some perspective, and young ladies a perspective getting into the workforce, what that looks like, and a lot of mentorship for them, right? And I really do, that does fill a lot of a bucket for me in terms of, you know, giving back. And then I do some presentation on resilience, because, you know, from the outside, everything looks amazing. You've got, you know, as a woman, I've, you know, got a big business, and I've got, you know, over 70 agents, and we've got, you know, over 12 staff. And, you know, there's a lot of that, but there's a lot of the back end that, from the personal perspective, what I've had to give up to be able to build this business, and, you know, what I've had to deal with. So I do a lot of advocacy and speaking on mental health. I've had some huge mental health, I would say, hurdles to overcome in my family. I almost lost some of my family 2 years ago from mental health. So for me, it's like dealing with that, owning a business, not being able to stop and breathe and recover myself from that. And like what I learned to be able to take the next step for myself of recovery, and then being able to share that in an open forum. It's amazing when you talk about mental health, how many other people it's affected and what they've had to endure on that, right? So I do speak a lot on that. So it's kind of like full circle for me. I think for me, it's just, I enjoy giving back and be able to tell a story of what's happened, to give somebody some hope or education and format. And everybody says to me, you know, you speak, Tracy, people listen, they come. So that must be my gift at some point.
I love that you brought up the mental health piece, Tracy, because we were touching on that a couple times yesterday. And the stats that I had from, can't remember the name of it right now. That's okay. This was right before COVID.
Yeah.
So like middle of 2019, the stats were general public was 1 in 5 people suffered from mental health issues. Service providers like police and firefighters, they were 1 in 3, and yet entrepreneurs were 1 in 2.
Yep.
That was before COVID. And now they're saying the general population is closer to 1 in 2 than it is 1 in 3. I can't imagine where everyone else is. So this type of discussion is so important right now. So with that in mind, I want to elevate just a little bit, right? And on a slightly higher note, what is it that you love about the work that you do and working in the style that you do with bringing in that mental health conversation?
You know, it's very simple. I love people. It really is. Like, it's not, there's not a 50-minute presentation on this. I love people. I genuinely love people.
Mhm.
I really want people to be able to see the best in themselves and to love themselves. I think that if we could do that, and if we could have changed that conversation from the first time we're born, instead of, no, you can't do this, you can't do that, you're not good enough, you're not this and this, to show people some positivity from the day they're born, I think we'd be all a different, not only a different country, but a different world. And I think we've got to change that. And I think we have to show more compassion and more empathy, right? More empathy is really the word, right?
Yeah.
It's more empathy and more cognitive behavior therapy is what I say, where we're really validating people's, what they're saying, what their concerns are, and not just brushing it off as it's, you know, oh, the sky is blue and the sun's coming out today. It's really taking time to appreciate and validate what people say and listen to them. And I think that for me, that is really a driver for me, because I understand for the mental health I had to endure with my family and the loss of one of my children because of it. My conversation of dealing with my child again, coming out of recovery, thank God, from this, was being able to be patient in my conversation and listening skills, to show empathy, love, and be able to validate. Because what we think might not be a huge hurdle to overcome could be everything to them,
Yep.
right? And I always say, you know, you got to get out of your head, get out of your thoughts, right? But mental health isn't just on the person dealing with it, it's on the family. And for me, I get chills thinking about that, because I think my conversation of being able to communicate my story on mental health and being a survivor, of being a supporter of dealing with family members with mental health crisis, I think that most people in my situation feel alone, because I felt very much alone. I thought, I got to have it all going on. Like, what am I doing? Why am I in this situation where I almost lost one of my children? from it. What did I do as a parent? Did I fail?
No,
Like,
no, no, no.
you know, and you like, it was terrible. Like, I remember and I went through this during COVID. Like, I couldn't even be in there with my child. I was literally on the floor in the front of Emerge on the concrete praying, right? I wasn't in there for 4 hours. I had no idea if they were going to make it or not. So that changed my life, because I sat there and, like, I thought the worst of myself, where I always thought the best of myself. And I really had to do a lot of work on myself, and I had to ask for help, right? I had to ask for help to be able to overcome that and realize that, you know, I am resilient and I am worth it myself. Because if I can get myself stronger, then I can show my child that, you know, we can overcome this together. And I'm doing this without any judgment to what's happened, but let's move forward. And that support has been game changing. Like, you know, she's thriving now. She's
Aw.
thriving now. And, you know, my conversation with her is so much better, and our love for each other is so much, and her love for herself. I see now, it's not going to be something, as you know, that it doesn't change and heal in a day.
No.
Like, this is a life journey.
Mhm.
But what I say to people in this, because, and I've also got permission to be able to talk on this on behalf of her. Because again, a lot of people think that, you know, oh, you can't, there's such a stigma on this. There's
Mhm.
such a judgment. But I said, if you don't talk about it, we're not going to change that conversation. Right. And the thing is what I say is that what I've recognized is that it's a gift with her, the time I have with her, because I know mental health can be up and down,
Yep.
and it can change in the dark. And as light as it is out there for her, the next day it could be so dark. And I'm very grateful for one, that she's my daughter, but I'm also very grateful for the time that I've had with her. And I think that's changed my outlook on everyone that I deal with. And sometimes you got to go through something really dark to understand, you know, where your gifts and where your light is, right?
Definitely. That was one of the things that really made me feel connected to very few people, especially in the financial industry or any similar industry, is they were lacking that empathy, that compassion, and as you said, listening skills. So I'm so glad to hear that. Tracy, what are you working on right now that you would love to share with us?
Oh my goodness. I've got so much we're working on.
Okay, like 30 seconds. No,
So,
go ahead.
from a mental health perspective, I'm super excited. I'm partnered with the foundation at the Grand River Hospital in Kitchener. And there, as we know, every hospital is in needs of funds and awareness on mental health. So one of the drivers for them is to bring in a triage unit for children. So from youth to age 18, so that it's a safe forum when you're coming and entering into the hospital in a crisis situation.
Yeah.
And right now, you're pretty much grouped with every age group. So it can be, as you know, very daunting and very intimidating,
Yep.
and potentially could take people into a more negative space, where we're trying to provide that safe, you know, space with the same type of age group to be able to give people a little bit more time to breathe. So we're working on an event for September next year. A black tie event, and to raise funds, raise awareness, and bring a lot of bigger companies together. So I'm so excited about this, because we're getting not only, you know, every conversation I talk to, someone has a story.
Oh, yeah.
Someone knows either themselves, or they know a loved one that they've gone through it. They want to be a part of it, and it's just growing, and it's going to morph into, I know, bigger than that. So for me, that's been a huge driver. I've done some small community ones, but this is one that we're doing as a massive collective one to bring a lot of companies together. So I'm focusing a lot on the mental health side. On the speaking side, I'm continuing to get out there to share, you know, my passion on showing resilience, financial literacy, you know, education on that, and then be an advocate for mental health. So I'm going into different forums in the community, and then outside as well. I'm going to be speaking at Harvard University in January. So I'm excited about that. Yes.
I
So
still have to do my edits, but yes.
yes, so I'm really excited about that, and kind of continue that. I'd like to really build on that speaking part as well, as part of my, you know, repertoire of what I do. And then from the mortgage side, it's, you know, I say we build it, the people come, and they can keep on, our agents and brokers come, and we still, you know, continue to provide them great education and a safe place to be able to thrive in what they do, and be able to spread the word of giving back, right, in this industry. And that's really what it is. It's not, again, not complicated. We just have to make sure we got the right people around, right, to be able to bring it together.
Definitely. So how do people find you, Tracy?
Oh, so many places. So
What are
Valko
your
Financial,
favorites?
yeah, exactly. So valkofinancial.ca is my website. We've got all our stuff on there, all my stuff on there. You can email me at tracy@valkofinancial.ca. I've got Instagram, which is just Tracy Valko. And I'm on Twitter with my name. I'm on Facebook, just my name as well. I keep it pretty simple as well. I'm on LinkedIn, you name it. And there's not very many Tracy Valkos out there. I got to tell you, there's
Probably
probably
not.
two out there.
Well, this was lovely. The ups, the downs, the smiles, the laughs, the tears.
Yes.
Yeah. It's a good.
Thank you so much. This was wonderful.
Yeah.
That's awesome, Tracy. Yeah, you bring a whole component to something very stuffy, suit and tie banking, making it real, because it is real. It is a hugely emotional decision to buy a home or a
Yeah,
business. Or
it is.
what you do is I love that you've added heart to something that has traditionally been so sterile.
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
that's
That's a
awesome.
great way to say it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Tracy. It's been absolutely wonderful to speak with you today.
Yeah, it was awesome. Thank you so much. It was lovely to meet the both of you and be able to have a great conversation and share my story.
Thank you
Yeah.
for making me feel a little better about getting a house next
Oh,
next year.
you'll get one. You'll get
That's
one.
right.
It's like I trust that the universe has the right one coming toward me. I don't know what it looks like, where it is, how much it costs, but I
It's
know I'll
coming.
be there.
It's coming.
Coming.
The best time to buy a house is yesterday. The next best time is right now.
Right.
Exactly. There you go.
Awesome. Thanks, Tracy.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, that was fantastic. You know, one of the things that I love about interviews on Amplify Your Message with you is I don't know who's coming next. I don't do any research on anybody.
I
They
did.
show
I
up. I'm
used
like,
to.
ooh, who's it going to be? It's like opening a present every 45 minutes.
Well, I used to research people because I'm like, I think I should know a little bit about them before I come in, especially if they're more of like the celebrity type, like Dr. Joe
Mm,
Vitale. He was one of the first people that we interviewed, and I'm thinking, oh my God, I don't know enough. How am I going to ask good questions? When I think of an interview between Marie Forleo and Seth Godin.
mm,
You don't know those names. It doesn't
yeah.
matter. Listen to the context. So the context was they were chatting about how many followers they have, but
Mm,
not to brag. They're like, okay, if you have a couple million followers and I have a couple million followers, there are still millions and millions and millions of people in this country who don't know who we are, let
yeah.
alone the rest of the world.
Yeah.
So really, how many people do they have following them? No matter how famous you are, there's always somebody who doesn't know you. So it's okay for me not to know the people that I'm interviewing and to just start with that curiosity that we're great at.
Yeah. Well, and to me, that's the fun and that's the magic is learning, just meeting somebody for the first time and finding out how great they are. Speaking of which, let's
Yes.
bring Kimberly on and meet her. Hello,
Hi,
Kimberly.
Kimberly.
Hi, good morning.
How are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you. Well, freezing. I'm in Edmonton,
I
but I think I'm ready.
It's not so bad. It was worse a week ago. We're out of the deep freeze a little bit. Are we back
You're
in
not?
today? I haven't even looked today.
Yeah, it was minus 42 wind chill overnight. So we're just barely climbing out of it. My car stopped registering at minus 30 this morning. I think it was about minus 35.
I don't, I have to say, I'm one of these people that I don't. Oh, you're right. It's minus 30. I guess it is colder this morning. I was like, it was plus, well, it was -5 or something a couple days ago. I thought, oh,
Oh,
we're
it's
on.
gonna be
No, we're back.
minus 2 tomorrow. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
we're
yeah.
we're in the roller coaster, but I'm not a big fan of the whole wind chill thing. I feel like it's like CBC shock and awe lying. I'm sorry, I do. Like, is it colder when it's windier? Sure, but I've been where there's like, well, it's minus 32, but it feels like 45, and I go outside and there's not a whisper of wind. I'm like, it doesn't feel like minus 45. It feels like minus 32 because it's minus 32. I don't know. They're trying to get ratings or something. It makes me nuts.
My husband feels the same as you, but I'm a full-on wind chill person. I don't care what the temperature in. What is the wind chill? You tell me because I feel it.
Well,
Exactly.
I run outdoors in the winter. And so if it's minus 39, I'll go out. But if it's minus 40, I'm like, it's a little too cold. And I come back with the big frosty eyelashes and the crusties all over my hoodie and my everything that I'm wearing. But yeah, so I don't like wind chill. I feel like it's just lying. They're just trying to get ratings. But anyway,
you know what? All of our brains work differently. And if that's what works for you, embrace it.
The fact of the
Then
matter
I'm
is,
over here on the East Coast, and we had like plus 10 the other day, and then to minus, or I think today is about minus 10.
the fact is there, my lad, she's cold up here in Alberta. That's the fact right there. She's cold up here in Alberta. All right.
Ours is pretty steady because we're on the water. We're just always slightly cold.
It's kind of sad, pathetic, but sorry, Laura, it's kind of sad, but there's nothing worse than talking about the weather, and we just spent 5 minutes talking about the weather. Let's get to the real meat and potatoes here. Kimberly, tell us about yourself.
No. Okay, before you tell us about yourself, Kimberly, I did this last time we did the show, not this week, but I want to know, what would 3 words be to describe yourself? We'll start there, and then you can tell us more.
3 words. Well,
I know it's really hard. That's why I like it.
I know. Thanks for putting me on the spot so quickly. I could give you my 3 values, but I feel like that isn't always doing people justice.
Let's switch
Maybe
it up.
We'll get into that later.
What would be 3 crazy cool words for other people to describe you?
Okay. Well, I mean, as most moms can relate, mother is
I actually don't like that.
I have 2 teenage girls, so it's full on.
So superhero.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, thank you. Some days, yes. Some days epic fails. So, whatever, you just go with it, like the weather. So, I also think I'm very much an adventurer. I do not shy away from challenges. So I think that's pretty fun. And, or it brings me fun. I don't know if anyone else likes it, but I think it's fun. And also, I am a bit of an introvert, which I don't think people would guess about me.
Oh, I already know. Scott knows I can read eyes. So your eyes are very open. So there's not a whole lot you're hiding from me.
There you go. I'm an open book. Well, I try to be. I mean, authenticity is actually one of my values. So there you are. You guessed it.
That's awesome. I love that you're an adventurer, but you don't like the cold. Because I'm like, people say to me, because I'm an endurance athlete, and people say, "Oh, do you ever want to go to Everest?" No, it's too cold.
Well, here's the funny thing. I don't mind the cold. I just have to be prepped for the cold. So, this is why this is happening, right? So, I can do anything, but I need the gear for it.
Yeah. So, Kimberly, tell us about yourself.
Well, great question. Nobody's actually asked it that way before. So I grew up in a small town in Leduc, Alberta, and didn't really venture out of there until I went to university and lived in Calgary, which is 3 hours away. But that was a huge move for me because I'd never lived in a city. A few years later, I moved to Toronto, which actually was a bit of a culture shock for me because I hadn't been anywhere like that with the diversity and the vastness of that city. But I quickly embraced it and loved it. And then since then, I've lived overseas. I've moved back to Edmonton to have family and be close to family, but still love traveling. So that's kind of my life in a nutshell. But along the way, I've actually attended 6 universities. Oh, wow. So apparently I love university. No, I actually do. I think I still want to go back one day. And I have a degree in fine arts and piano performance, in education. I was a teacher for 6 years. And then I became a psychologist. So I went back and got my master's. And so I've been a psychologist for nearly 20 years. And I have co-founded and run a counseling agency that's a nonprofit called Momentum Walking Counseling, where we decrease the barriers to accessing therapy. And then I retired from that position 3 years ago and went out on my own. And after being trained by Brene Brown. And so now I facilitate her workshops, but also am creating my own leadership courses and still help people in high performance activities and jobs to be their best. So that's what I'm doing now. And it's so fun. I sure love it.
So you took all of the things that I loved throughout my life, went to university for them, and then still ended up in the same kind of space where I am. I love that you said that you studied under Brene Brown. I didn't even know who she was until I was talking about constructive vulnerability at a workshop at a conference. People came up to me afterwards. They're like, "Oh, did you learn this from Brene?" And I'm like, "Who the hell's Brene?" For those who don't know Brene Brown, she is like the person who talks about vulnerability. I didn't know this.
Yeah, she's a shame and vulnerability researcher out of Houston, Texas, and she's been doing that for most of her life, but has written some very, very good books on the topics, including perfectionism, which is one of my personal favorites as a recovering perfectionist, still on the journey. But
Yeah. I was like, yeah, okay, you said it. So then what got you into this work? Like, why did you just stick with the piano? Or why didn't you just stick with all of the things?
Yeah,
that you
well, love of adventure.
Yeah.
I mean, I think in the beginning, like most of us, I just needed to pay the bills. Like what did I like doing well enough that I could, actually make money doing it? So that's kind of how I started. And as I went forth in my career, I just learned about what other people were doing. So, you know, as a musician, that fed my soul, but that didn't really lead me to jobs that, I felt could be long-term solutions for me. So that's where I got into education because I've always loved kids and, still do. I actually trained as a child therapist. That evolved. But yeah. And then when I was a teacher, the school counselor at the school I was at, I thought was just a fantastic human being. And I just asked her one day, I'm like, where did you go to school? How did you do this? Like, tell me how I be you, how I can become you. And so she led me to Gonzaga University out of Spokane. And I did my master's the next year, started that, and, met my husband in the middle there. We actually went to high school together, but we never had any classes together. And so we didn't really know each other. We united at our 10-year reunion. It was fate. I like to say. We only grew up like 5 blocks from each other, but we never really interacted. So, so then that happened and, I moved back to Edmonton, but yeah. And then just there were opportunities. I was volunteering at, and a nonprofit agency here in Edmonton. At the time, it was called the Support Network because I didn't know any psychologists in Edmonton. I knew lots in Calgary, but not here. And so I just thought, oh, let me get into the field and just get to know other people because it can be a very isolating profession because you work alone a lot with your clients. And so I volunteered at the walk-in program there, and they subsequently had to shut down. And well, I saw that as a challenge, not as an obstacle. So we all banded together and, started our own program.
Nice.
So yeah, things just come your way, and the only reason I actually felt confident to start a nonprofit charity was because my daughter's school didn't have a playground. And the chair of that committee, after a year, decided to resign. And so I was like, well, someone's got to build them a playground. And just going through that process of working with the city and the province and writing grants and fundraising with a bunch of other amazing parents, that really gave me a lot of insight and tools into how to actually, run a successful nonprofit. Like I had the basics. I knew who was involved. I knew who to talk to. I knew kind of the routes to go at that point. So yeah, opportunity came. I was like, sure, why not? Seems like the right thing to do.
Tell us more about the work that you do today. So this we brought all of this stuff into how you got to today with the high performance and working with vulnerability as a psychologist, nonprofits. What does it look like today for you?
Yeah. Well, so that evolved as well. Just in my life, I know a lot of people who are high achievers in sport, in business, in academics. And, I really saw all of us struggling, especially, I'm in my 40s now, and we just get to a certain point where we have it all. And some days it's not enough. And we don't know why it's not enough because it should be enough. And so, when I decided to retire from momentum, that was a decision based on the fact that I was burning out. And my psychologist, because every good coach and therapist has a coach and therapist for everybody. Yeah. So my therapist, who was out of Toronto at the time, asked me, like, what is energizing for you and what is depleting for you? And I found that a lot of the tasks I was doing daily were very depleting. My wheelhouse is being in front of people. It's not writing grants and securing, funds from a fundraiser. Like, I don't mind being involved in that stuff, but I found after 7 years, that was enough. I needed to get back in front of people. So this was right before COVID. And I felt like the organization was in a good place. And I had just been trained by Brene. And I was like, oh gosh, now I feel like I have the tools that I've been missing.
Yes.
And so I thought, you know what, I'm just going to do workshops. Like, I'm just going to get my feet wet in that, just do a few workshops. That'll be great for the rest of my life. Yeah, no, COVID hit.
Oh.
and everything went virtual. And I know, just like everyone else, we were just like, oh my God, what the hell? How do we do this? We're used to being, in a room with someone. So reluctantly, I figured it out. And all of a sudden, too, people just started asking for my services one-on-one. And I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm starting up my private practice again. And I could virtually. The kids were home a lot, but, and so it just kind of evolved out of that. And just so many of the conversations I had, I mean, there were so many people coming to me who were the top of their game and felt like they needed someone that knew what they were talking about, that had either been through it, are going through it, who have gotten through it successfully. But also, as a psychologist, I do have the educational background to draw from too. And so experience, education, I don't know, I feel like that's what people really were looking for.
Scotty, I'll be right back.
I am.
Yeah, that's awesome. Laura had to run for a sec, but it's funny. There's so many things you were dovetailing on. And one of the big things that really struck me is, have you ever read The E-Myth, The Entrepreneur Myth by Michael Gerber?
No, sounds like I need to, though.
It's a neat book. And it's actually, like most entrepreneurs, you've paralleled a lot of the pieces in it. And it's a phenomenal book. He talks about that they're basically in this entrepreneur world, there's 3 personality types. There's the technician, and the technician who's somebody that's good at their craft. Like for myself, I was in architecture for 13 years and I got fat and sick. And then I made a life change and I got super fit and super healthy. And then everybody started asking me how I did that. So then I became certified as a trainer and I started working in the gym part-time because I loved it a lot. And I liked helping people be healthy and fit, and it spread through the office. And all of a sudden I realized I don't want to be in architecture anymore. Because I had become a good personal trainer. And so then what happens is I became a personal trainer. So I quit my career in architecture. I went to work in a gym. It was great. Loved it. And then you have what's called the entrepreneurial seizure, which is you're in the gym being a trainer, or you're in the company being a psychologist, and you're like, I can start my own company. I can do a better job than you. You don't even know what you're doing. I'm going to do it way better. I'm going to fix everything. I'm going to start my own company. And you have the entrepreneurial seizure and you start your own company. And then very quickly you realize, holy crap, I've got to do human resources and payroll and marketing, and I've got to do accounting and taxes, and I got to fix and maintain equipment, and I got to fix the toilet's broken, and somebody didn't show up today.
I washed the floors and
wash the floors, but I still want to coach
my favorite.
people. Yeah, but I still want to coach people, and somebody needs a big marketing idea, like, because we need a direction, but I got to clean the toilets again, but I still want to coach people, and you go insane.
Yeah.
Right.
It's just, you know what it is? It's having unrealistic expectations of yourself. right? Like I have all these great ideas. Sure, I could do it all in a day. And it would take the average person a month to do all that stuff. And then we beat ourselves up when we can't do it. And it's this vicious cycle of like overwhelm and not good enough and, you know, all that. Yeah. For me anyway. I'm not saying it's for
Oh,
everybody.
no, that sounds familiar.
It's like,
I planned a conference, like a whole conference, which is a very structured thing for me, in 6 weeks.
yeah, of course.
You
You can.
Why do I keep doing this? It's because, just as you said, I had this great idea.
Yes.
I thought I could do it because I had
Mhm.
just gone to Harvard, and we were
Mhm.
talking about that last time, did a
Mhm.
talk, came home, and it was just like thing. And I'm like, do I have the energy to do this? Do I really want to cancel it another year? The answer is no. The messages that we have in our business, they're too important not to share. So I said, I got 6 weeks. Can I do it? It's probably going to be messy, but I did it. And now I'm going through that a couple weeks after, going, was it good enough? It didn't turn out the way that I wanted, and like all those little stories we tell ourselves.
Yeah, that's the vulnerability hangover
Oh,
for
yeah.
sure. Yeah, well, you know, the wisdom I took from my burnout was just because I can doesn't mean I should,
Mhm.
right? And so now I look at all the opportunities coming to me, and I think I'm still struggling. No, I'm on the other side of it, but it still pops up once in a while with that scarcity mindset of like, if I don't take this, will something else ever come along?
Oh,
But
yeah.
now I realize, oh, yeah, there's always going to be opportunities, and the fit has to be good for me as well as for the other party. It can't just be one-sided. It can't just be good for them. And so now I'm discerning about how I spend my time. And trust me, there's always that pull. Whenever I hear about something, I'm like, yes, sign me up. And then I had that moment of, whoa, think about it first. And so now when I'm spending my time places, I'm doing it intentionally because I really know that I'm going to love it. And I really now am figuring out like, how is this impacting my whole life if I take this on? What's the time commitment? And how will this impact not just me, but my family and my ability to have friends and I didn't have friends when I resigned. Like, I mean, they were there, but I wasn't sure if any of them would even talk to me because it had been so long and it scared the shit out of me. I was like, oh my God, this is like one of the unintended consequences, right? Like you just don't socialize, you don't sleep enough, your health, like you too, Scott. Coach Scotty. I just saw your title. But, you know, it falls by the wayside in service of everything else. And it's like that price is too high for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and you know, like we're talking about with the entrepreneur myth, you're trying to run those 3 jobs. Like when I ran a 15,000 square foot gym with 27 staff, and all of a sudden I'm trying to be all of the things, and you just explode. You just become a mess. And
Yeah.
yeah, friends, I don't have those. I don't have time for that. Like I'm working like all the time. And it's funny how COVID has been a challenge, but it's been the biggest gift in the world if you're willing to look at it, right? So for me, it was the biggest gift in the world because it gave me pause. Like the government shut down my gym, all gyms, and I was like, "We're gonna dig in, and we're gonna fight, and we're gonna do online programs. I'm gonna make videos every day." I'm like, whoa, time out. What are you doing? And then I just stopped, and I was like, "Oh, hang on a second. It's been a good 18 years. This is over. I'm out." And I let it go, and I sold off all my equipment. People were like, "What are you gonna do now?" I don't know. Like, but I knew I was gonna go back to being a technician. I was gonna go back to working actually with people and one-on-one and helping people and creating that magic that I fell in love with in the first place. That is not, "Oh, somebody slept in. I got to go open the gym and run the front desk and sell memberships." That was not what I signed up for, but that was part of it. "Oh, the toilet's broken. You better fix that." So I love that there's been a pause to return to what we absolutely love. So what are the things you absolutely love that you're working on right now where you're trying to really just take over and do the best thing in the world that would make your heart sing? What's your, what's your juice?
Yeah, taking over the world. Well, I mean, something I'm getting into, but it feels like home, is I'm speaking more to large in-person audiences.
Oh,
Wow.
And
take me with you.
I know.
I haven't been on a live stage in 3 years.
Oh no. Well, and at first I thought, that would be really intimidating. And then I realized, oh my gosh, I was a teacher of teenagers for 6 years. There is nothing more intimidating than that at times. So I'm good. I got my people out there, so I'm fine. And it's so much fun. Obviously it's a lot of energy, it's a lot of preparation, but I find it really rewarding. But so that's kind of new for me. That's not really an area I've done a lot of. So that's fun, but I really, really love facilitating workshops. Like I love to see people's transformations in such a small amount of time. And there's also something about being in person with other people. Like I love how participants learn as much from each other as they do from me. Or maybe like I say something one way and then they have a discussion at lunch and someone else says it a different way and it's like, and then it clicks for somebody. Like I just love all that learning and interaction, and yeah, there's nothing like it for me.
Yeah, I used to try to stop myself when we would have guests on here and they would explain something. At first, I would stop myself from trying to say it in a different way. And then I realized, okay, if my mind is automatically doing that, then there's probably at least one listener who needs me to say it because they don't think the same way as the person speaking. I also use like a lot of analogies when I'm talking about concepts because that is how I learn.
Mhm.
And so now I'm hearing you say that, workshops are so powerful because of those discussions. That's what I like about this. You saying your message is not the same as you telling us about your message and us reflecting it back to you through our own lens.
Oh, absolutely. And the layers of learning can be so deep, right? And that's what I think is so fascinating and missing sometimes in, I guess what people are looking for. We want the soundbite, we want the quick fix, we want the information, but it takes practice and time and rolling it around in your brain and working with it to really be able to implement it in your life. And it's only because I've done it, I've gone through the process, I continue to go through that process, that I understand how many times I need to learn something and unlearn something else and learn it again in order for it to actually make a difference in my life.
Mhm.
So, if that was the wisdom I was to impart on my clients, people I work with, people I talk to, it's not a quick fix.
No.
It's a lifestyle. It's a change that you keep doing and you keep coming back to, and it feels like the same topic, but it's on a different level.
Yeah, I hear that conversation about leaning into the niche
Mm,
all the time. And people are like, but I'm saying, we said this in the last interview, but I'm saying the same thing. You're not that one note if you were saying it in different ways. You're not that one note when you go to different depths or see it through different lenses. It's building the multifaceted view of what this really truly is.
mhm,
It's so deep, so beautiful.
mhm.
Yeah. So how do we find you, Kimberly?
Well, um, lots of people find me on Facebook, which
Knock
is
on
kind
your
of
door.
fun, which means maybe that's my demographic, like people like me. Yes, so Facebook, I'm under Courageous Leadership right now. I'm in the process of just rebranding to my own name, just embracing that. I don't need to hide behind fancy words anymore.
You have a
Um,
superhero name, so why not?
And my website's called courageousleadership.ca. And so all of my workshops, working one-on-one, speaking engagements will be up there. So if anyone's interested in coming to see one or, working with me, I'm happy to have a consultation.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any final comments for us? Something that you didn't get to say, but you want to say now?
Well, I think that, even for myself, and this is something I actually thought of as we were talking about entrepreneurship,
Mhm.
asking for help is really one of those things that seems like such a no-brainer when we're busy, but is actually, I think for a lot of us, especially in the perfectionist space, it's one of those things that's feels really vulnerable, right? As if we're admitting weakness or, like we're not good enough or we're not doing things right. And after I retired from my position, my predecessor hired an assistant. And I was like, God damn it, good for her. Like, why didn't I think of that? Like, that would have been amazing to have an assistant. And I was so proud of her. I was like, that's what I was missing is I was trying to do it all myself and I didn't need to. There was other people that could have helped, right? So, and that kind of translates, I think, into being able to work with somebody when you've got stuff in your life that just isn't getting better and it's stressing you out and it's, frustrating you. Like, reach out for help. There is help out there and it'll help more than you even imagine. And I think people don't think it's too expensive maybe, or that it won't help or it won't be a waste of time. Just give it a shot.
Yeah.
Like, you'll be amazed.
Yeah.
There's a cartoon that I've seen several times, and there's a patient laying on the couch in the psychiatrist's office, and the patient says, "Oh, can we skip past the part where I'm the problem? Is there another something else? Can we?" So what is what's an ideal client, or maybe with what you can share? I know there's always confidentiality, but who's your like ideal? What do you? Somebody comes to you and they're like, "I have this problem," and you're like, "This is how I solve it, and this is what their life looks like later." What is your optimal there?
Yeah. I mean, I like to work with people, and I do a lot with people who have never been to therapy before. And it's kind of like this new scary world. And I walk them through it and I hold their hand, and it's really fun for me. But, my greatest joy is working with people who have tried things before. They feel like they've done everything and they're kind of at the end of their rope. And I'm like, sign me up. That is my wheelhouse. I will show you. I will show you the small piece you're missing, because it's usually that hard and that simple, right? It's like, it's small, but it's huge, and people are doing 99% things right of the things right. And it's like, I can just help guide you in that one little way that will make all the difference. So yeah, that's my ideal client.
When I'm coaching people with endurance athletics and running and stuff, I call it the one thing that will change everything. Right? That
100%.
keystone piece that
the keystone.
you
Yes.
just shift that, everything's better.
Yeah. And I think, a lot of times we think it's unimportant, that piece, or we think that it can't possibly make that big of a difference, or, or maybe it's just something we'd never thought of before, just a way of looking at it that we never realized in the past. And so having someone look at the outside of from the outside, look at your life, it's so much easier for us to see it because we can see the big picture objectively. I know even for my own self, and I went back to coaching about 6 months ago because I was like, okay, I got these couple things I've been to therapy about for 20 years, and I feel like I need to just put them to bed, but I'm missing a piece. There's a piece I'm missing. I can't figure it out. And sure enough, that little perspective shift was huge. I'm like, yes, that's what I've been missing. That's the piece, but I'm too close to it. And I've been dealing with it for too long, and there's too much stuff getting in the way. I need like a flashlight. I need someone to be my flashlight.
When I
shine the light on it. I don't know what it is.
I think I said it yesterday. One of my favorite quotes is by Albert Einstein. It says, "The same mind that created the problem cannot solve the problem, and sometimes can't even see the problem."
Oh, 100%.
And that's what coaches do. Coaches are like, "Oh, well, you're just doing that." What? Like, we're just in shock,
Yeah.
Or the complete resistance of it. They're like, I'm not doing that. And I do want to apologize. My mind was like, yep, it's quarter after that. It's over. No, we still had another 10 minutes.
We still got 10 minutes.
Are you kidding? That was a great jump at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think a big piece of it too, and especially when we're struggling with perfectionism, like a lot of us high performers are, is that there's this myth that if we think perfect, act perfect, be perfect, do everything perfectly, we can avoid the shame, the blame, and the criticism. And so we're actually super, super sensitive people. So we don't even want people to think that we have issues, that we make mistakes, that
Mm,
we're human, right? We try to be superhuman. And in order to, I don't know, for people to love us, I guess, that we
mm,
can't show up and be human. And other people can, but we can't. And so, like, that's, I think, a huge barrier for people for asking for help is, it's sometimes hard to admit that we're just like everyone else. We make mistakes and it's okay. Like, we're still
mm.
lovable and, we don't do things perfectly all the time. Like, shocker. Newsflash. But I think we have in our brains that we need to be like that in order to be successful or be loved or whatever it is. And nothing could be further from the truth.
Yeah.
In fact, the more open we are to our flaws, I suppose,
Mm.
the easier it is to change them because it's like, okay, I know there's something. Let's fish it out. Let's dig it out. Let's figure it. And then I want to let it go. My goal is to be a better person, not a perfect person.
The thing
When
that
I
bugs me
yeah,
the
I do that. Sorry, Laura. I do that with my coaching too. Like one of the
Mhm.
things I think that I do maybe really well is that I'm real. I'm vulnerable. I'm like, yeah, listen, I still struggle with this. I would eat Ben and Jerry's ice cream every day of my life, like if I could. But I know what happens when I do, so I don't. So here's how I deal with that because I still want to. Still want
Mhm.
to, but I don't because I like being fit and healthy, and I know that's not healthy. And I think there's a real piece around maybe it's a movement, maybe it's different now, but I remember back in the early 2000s when I first started going to self-help classes and I went to see Tony Robbins and T. Harv Eker and Robert Allen and Mark Victor Hansen and all these guys doing all these things. And it's easy to put them on a pedestal as if like, oh, they're so perfect and they never make any mistakes and I want to be just like you. And then inevitably a lot of them would explode. Like it's like one guy got like a big, messy, ugly divorce and he was caught having an affair. I'm like, but in your thing, you talked about not doing that. Like, yeah, they're just people. And I
Mhm.
think there's a gift in being real and being
Mhm.
vulnerable and being a top achiever, but going, but yeah, I struggle too,
yeah.
right?
Well, yeah. And, there's that part of our brain that tells us that nobody else struggles with this. Nobody else has these problems. Nobody else goes through this.
Yeah,
And if only everyone knew that,
that's true at all.
our brains are very similar. We're all the same species, right? They work in pretty much the same ways, with slight variations, but, the basic fundamentals are there. And yeah, if only we knew that we're not alone as much as we think we are.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges. Like I know for myself, when I was 13, I went home from school one day at Christmas time and I had the letters written and I was committing suicide and I was done. And
Mhm,
I still remember the taste of the gun barrel in my mouth and my finger on the trigger. And thank goodness my best friend walked in the door and stopped me from blowing my head off. And
mhm,
because he could tell somehow something's when Scott said goodbye today, it wasn't see you next week. It was something's up. And he followed me
mhm,
home. In the 80s, we didn't lock our doors. So he walked in and stopped me from killing myself. And at that time, I was convinced nobody on the planet Earth was going through what I was going through. Nobody had ever gone through what I was
mhm,
going through, and nobody would understand what I was going through. And that's just a load of crap.
Yep.
You're
mhm.
not alone. Everybody struggles.
Yeah.
The most successful people in the world have struggled. They're struggling right now.
Mhm,
And it's about getting help and asking for help and talking to someone and finding anybody that will listen and realizing you're not alone and there is
mhm.
hope and this too shall pass. And that's where somebody like you is a life rope.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you. It's such a privilege to do it. And it's so true. And we can be that for each other, you know, even just in life. And, that human connection is so important. But I think there is a time and place for professionals, right? Like there are situations where, you know, our friends and our families we're just beyond their capacity for certain topics potentially, right? Or certain situations. And so that's where, you know, connection with others is so helpful and important. And professionals, you know, need to have a role in our lives too, because it's beyond the average person sometimes. They just don't know how to support us always, right?
Well, I think there's maybe a lot of stigmas too, like fear that
Oh,
to
yeah.
me, the thought of going to see a counselor or a therapist is like going to the dentist office. It's going to smell like a
Mhm.
dentist office. It'd be all super official, and there's going to be file folders and paperwork. And like, it's how do you have people feel calm and confident that listen, it's gonna be okay. You know,
Mhm.
I'm your Auntie Kimberly, and I'm going to help you. Like, right?
Exactly. I should think about that one. Yeah, no, it's so true. I mean, I think that, you know, this is what I try and train therapists to do is just relate to people as human beings, right? People are not a diagnosis. People are not what they do. People are not what they've done. They are human beings. And so if you can connect with that first, and that's your overarching kind of perspective as you're a person who is worthy of love and belonging. I believe it. I believe it for you. I believe it for me. I believe it for everyone. Then people can feel that your intention is coming from an authentic place of love and kindness, and that I truly do want the best for you. Like this may be my chosen career, but what's more important to me is that you feel better and that, you know, your goals are my goals. If something's a problem for you, it's a problem for me. It doesn't matter if it's your closet's messy or, you know, you're going through a divorce. Like all of it's relevant to me. If it's a problem for you, I care about it. And I don't know that everybody thinks that we care as much as we do. We think
Yeah.
about people after we talk about them, and we think about how to help them. And we, you know, these are relationships we have. Yeah, it's not a paycheck. So,
Yeah, we were talking about caring in the last interview and just how important that is to really building the connections with everyone that we have a relationship with. It's like
mhm,
I didn't say this in the last interview, but I spoke to over 50 different financial people, and one of them listened. One. And
mhm,
I'm not saying names, obviously, for reasons, but that one person cared enough to listen and cared enough to not put me in the boxes
mhm,
like we all tend to want to do, or the diagnosis or anything like that. It was, I see you as a whole person, not this version of a person. And what
Mhm.
I was going to say earlier was, now that I remember, that's okay. The letting go. Everybody, like all the conversations I heard from everywhere was just let go, just let go. How do I let go? And it drove me nuts for years. I'm like, I don't know what that means. I don't know what it looks like. I don't know how to do it. I don't know. Do you get that too? Do you get the people who just don't understand what it means to let go?
Well, I get people with all sorts of things, including that. And I think the biggest thing that I teach people, which, you know, might be different, is um, that your thoughts are just thoughts
Mm.
and they're not necessarily true. And you don't have to believe them. And it might just be your brain going on a tangent, and that you can intentionally think thoughts that are helpful, because lots of our thoughts are not helpful
Yeah.
Mm.
and aren't true. And so that's what I love doing, is really helping, you know, because I've done this for so long, I'm able to kind of pinpoint in conversation the things that people are saying to themselves that are not helpful. And then we work through a process of figuring out, well, how do you want to feel instead? And how do we get you there by thinking something that is different? And so, you know, I think that's one of the best kept secrets, although worst kept secrets, because I wish everyone knew it. We don't have to believe our thoughts.
And it's fascinating too, even just to hear you say that, because I just had a moment of like, I'm not the only one that has negative thoughts a bunch of times a day. Like, oh my gosh, because we have to realize that it's just a thought. It's like a fart. It's gonna stink for a second and go away. You don't bend your life on it.
No, and we have a part of our brain that tries to protect us and keep us safe.
Yes.
So that's where that comes from. It's from an honest place. It's just that it's a primitive place. And a lot of the things that used to kill us back in caveman days are not threats anymore.
Yeah.
But our brains tell us that things are threats and they're not. And so fortunately, we have a prefrontal cortex and we can, observe these things and manage them differently. But it's work, and I'm happy to help guide people through that process because Lord knows even I need help with that sometimes.
Well, and I think there's a piece like it's called negativity bias, and it's a survival mechanism. If you're walking down a jungle path and you see a warthog sleeping in the middle of the path, and you've got your spear ready, and you're gonna feed your family for a week, and it's amazing, and you're just about ready to kill the warthog, you're paying attention, and all of a sudden a king cobra slithers out and rears its head at you. What do you pay attention to?
Yeah,
The cobra.
totally.
You have to, because if you don't, you'll die. And we're designed for that. And unfortunately, the media knows that. And on a moment by moment basis, they're trying to tell us that the world is full of king cobras, and it's not. And we have to shut that off. And a lot of times, if my brain was like, it's like, okay, thank you for sharing. We're okay. And focus on something good.
Yeah. And, check your source, right? I mean, I even do that with people in their brains. I'm like, check the source. Like, who is this coming from? And do you even like that person? If not, don't believe it. Let it go. Let it go, as they say, right, Laura?
Let it go.
Let it go. All right, here we go.
I need the blue dress.
I love it.
Oh, this has been awesome, Kimberly. I love that there are people like you that do what you do and have dedicated so much of your life and your professionalism to making such a difference to help people.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. This has been amazing. I always like meeting new people. And Scott, I know we've met once before, but this is great to reconnect. And so nice to meet you, Laura.
Yeah, I was flipping through my notes. I think we met during a breakout room in one of the Blue Talks events that Corey did, because I knew we had chatted before, but
yeah, you were very helpful.
I've seen you around.
That is awesome.
Love it.
Well, thanks for being on the show today, Kimberly. And so if people want to get a hold of you, courageousleadership.ca.
You got it.
For one-on-one help or speaking or workshops, all kinds of good stuff to help you out.
Yes, happy to help.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time today. Have a wonderful day.
Okay, take care. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Oh yeah, my hat.
Bye-bye.
I got my hat.
Well, that was awesome. Super great interview. I sent a message to our next guest, and hopefully he gets that right away. I don't see him sitting here yet. So we're waiting for Alan. Alan is next, and I've met him a couple times, so that should be a fun interview. That was really great with Kimberly. I'm so glad that people like her are out there in the world making a difference, because it's a little scary inside your brain sometimes.
It is.
Yeah. I call it the itty bitty snotty committee, and they don't always
yeah.
IBSHIC, the itty bitty snotty committee. There's another word than snotty, but we'll say IBSHIC. I will say snotty for this one. But yeah, they're saying negative things. You're such a loser. You're never going to succeed. Nobody likes you. And you just that's enough with you, right? So we're going to be okay. We're going to keep shining.
Definitely.
So yeah,
I'm wondering if it's a time zone thing.
Yeah, it could be.
So yeah,
waiting for our next guest. And in the meantime, until Alan makes it on, let's take a moment and just chat. Laura, what do you do that turns your life and helps you help people? What's your joie de vivre?
Ooh, it has evolved. Like our last guest, Kimberly. I did start in architecture like you did.
Yeah.
And then through architecture, it was about sustainable lifestyles, not just about sustainable buildings. So I wanted to know how I could use environmental psychology to manipulate the habits of the users of the buildings. So it was all about active design and well design and mental health through design without ever having a conversation with the people. Then when I left architecture, it was still focusing on that high performance, on that mental health. I didn't know how to really say it at first. And then really it was after working with solopreneurs for so long, I realized they really need help with their stories. They're wanting to share, they're wanting to be vulnerable. They are high performing people, but they stop themselves because of that healing, because of that trauma, because of those stories. They don't want to be seen as weak. They don't want that tribal mindset to happen. And so
Mhm.
now the thing that I love to do is kind of what we're doing here. I get to learn about your stories and help you share them and elevate the way that you share them in a different
Mhm.
way. Because it's not about the thing that you did and the results that you got. That's just a small piece of it. But if I tell you, Coach Scotty, that all you have to do to be successful is to share your story with emotion, you're like, okay, but like, how do I do that? So I really want to have those conversations, get deep into your story, why you don't want to share your story, why you do want to share your story, and what that'll look like for you.
Well,
Because
speaking of sharing stories, let's
yeah.
get Alan on and share his
Oh, is
story.
he here?
He's just arrived.
Yay. And so did my daughter. Hi,
Yeah.
Alan.
Alan, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you.
It's good to have you. You're a bit quiet
Bye.
on the microphone.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm quiet.
Yeah,
You are
sounds a bit
quiet. Yes.
quiet.
I don't know why, because I haven't been when I've talked with other people.
Okay. Sounding a little better now.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes it takes a moment to connect fully.
Yeah, for sure. How are you doing today?
Good. How about both of you?
Really well. Speaking for me. Laura, good?
I'm doing really well because I'm on Coach Scotty's 21-day nutrition reset. I had to slip that in there.
Eating
Good.
well, feeling great. Well,
Feeling
Alan,
great.
tell us about yourself.
Well, I have a PhD in counseling psychology. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, licensed chemical dependency counselor. I have certification in applied clinical nutrition. I'm an internationally best-selling author as a result of having chapters in 2 different compilation books.
Mhm.
And I just recently self-published my own book. And that book is about recovery from addiction.
Wow. That's
Yeah,
excellent.
I had to check the Blue Talks. You're in one of the Blue Talks books, aren't you?
Volume 3.
Volume 3. Okay. Because I'm like, I recognize your face just in the community so much. I'm like, is he in book number 1? No, you're not in book number 1. You're in book 3. Got it.
Mhm. Yeah, I've connected with Alan a couple times on Corey Poirier's Blue Talks messages and his we have a quarterly connection where we all get together and there's always lots of good breakout rooms and lots of value there. So, Alan, how did you get into this work? Like, this is a pretty amazing field to be in. How did you get started in all this?
Well, when you say the field, do you mean generally the field of mental health or one of the specific things I do?
Well, I think the field of mental health for sure, but I think addictions counseling seems to be a big one. What of the things you do, marriage counseling, what's your favorite one?
Everything. I love helping people. That's my favorite thing.
Yeah.
And I can give you the quick general answer and then the specific answer because they are different.
Yeah.
Okay. When I was around 7 or 8 years of age, I was sitting on a piano bench in my parents' home, and I heard my parents talking. And my father was saying to my mother that one of our relatives was coming over because she has a problem and he wants to help her with it. And when I heard him say that, I decided, I want to do that someday. I want to help people in that way. And then there was a series of events that led me to doing specifically what I'm doing today. But what led me into the addiction field was I was working for the court system in New Jersey, doing psychological evaluations for the court. And I was looking over one of the bulletin boards one day, and I saw that there was an ad for a part-time addictions counselor in an outpatient program. And my friends, several of my friends were working in the addiction field. And I thought, gee, I wonder if I would ever want to do that. This would be a great opportunity to explore it. So I applied for the job and I got it. And once I worked there, I just knew I had to add that to what I do.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting when we pay attention to what happens in our lives. And that way we can make the decisions that can really be very helpful to us.
Yeah. It's funny too when you drill down to kind of find, and sometimes it takes a while to digest how you got to where you got to. I mean, I know for myself, I went into architecture for 13 years because my guidance counselor in high school said, you should do this, you'd be good at it. And I was like, okay, I needed something. I didn't know what I was doing. But then I got fat and I got sick and I got stressed and I was a workaholic and I was like, everything was falling apart. And then I got told I needed to take care of myself, eat right, and exercise. So then I started to learn how to do that. I started working with a trainer and I went to a gym and I thought, holy cow, I love this. Oh my gosh, do I love this? And it took a while for me to realize that I was going down the exact same road my dad went down. And he died when I was 16. He was a workaholic. He was doing everything he could for his family and working all the time. And he had some other challenges, stuff like that, but he died when I was 16. And I thought, wow, I was going down that path. And as I began to help people, I started to realize I was trying to save my father's life with every person I helped. Every person I helped, I was trying to save somebody's life. I'm like, okay, you're not going to die at 53. You're not going to die at 53. You're not going to die at 53. And then I started to realize, wow, that's what's driving me to change the world, was that one moment.
Yeah.
And it took a long time to figure that out.
Mhm.
But that's similar to yourself. You're like, you saw somebody when you were younger making that difference. And you're like, man, I want to do that.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So what does it look like to work with you, Alan? What do you do? Like, what ways does this manifest in the world?
Well, basically, I take what I call a practical approach when I talk with people to be helpful to them. I integrate some of the theory, but I like to be, as they say, real and practical. So the way I work basically is I find out from the people that I speak with what they want to change. In a certain sense, I could say what's not been working for them, how they would like it to be different, what's preventing that, or what has been preventing that from happening. And then we identify strategies for them to use to see what kind of a difference it can make. And then each time that we meet, we talk about how helpful those strategies have been, if they need to be more helpful, ways they can become more helpful. And then, of course, the person uses those next additions between the time I talk to them and the next counseling session. And then we go from there. And I use humor in a loving way. I never use it to be sarcastic or to be hurtful. But what I do is I want to help people to have some lightheartedness about what they're going through so it doesn't feel so heavy to them.
Yeah.
Because the more heavy it feels, obviously, the more difficult it could be to get past it. And I want them to see that whatever it is that they want that's realistic, that it is possible and how it is possible.
So if I have dreams of taking over the world, I don't mean owning the world. Basically, I want to like change the conversation in the world. I want to change the energy in the world. I want to change how much we feel like human beings in the world. Do you have processes that can help me with that, Alan?
Yes. So following what I just said, I would say to you, well, what is it about the world that you would like to see different?
Oh, that ties into my mission. So there's like 10,000 different things that I would like to see different in the world. Some of them are bigger.
Let's do like 5,000 to start
Oh,
with.
okay.
Let's
So
just start with 5,000. You know, I have to tell you,
Let's start easy.
start easy. I have to tell you, the first thing I thought and I wanted to do, Laura, was go, what do you want to do today, Brian? So
I
anyway,
know, take
yeah.
over the world. Well,
Same
it
thing we
was
do every
mentioned
day.
earlier, so I thought I'd bring it back up.
Yeah.
Let's see. One thing I would like to change in the world: the conversation around marketing and
Okay.
stories. Yeah,
Okay.
it's all tied.
So I would say to you, if I was meeting with you in private, which I'm going to say to you now anyway,
Yeah.
is the way you would start to change the world is by being the change that you want to see in the world.
Oh, yes.
And talking with people where you know they'll be receptive to whatever you might say, rather than telling them the way you would like them to be, or maybe being critical in any way, explore what's contributing to their point of view. So that can give you an idea as to whether talking about your point of view would be okay for them to hear.
Definitely. Because one of the things that I say is that I'd like to say it this way because it piques people's interest, that whole negativity bias. So here's the phrase. I call BS on the whole know, like, and trust. But people, I'm in a place where you and Scotty both know me. So you know I'm not like, I call BS on it. It's a playful space. And so it really does open up a conversation. You're like, oh, I know Laura. She's not going to be mean about it. There's something hidden behind this. Like, what does she mean?
Yeah, and it also encourages ongoing conversation.
I'm sorry, they're vacuuming outside my door.
Yeah, it encourages that ongoing conversation for sure. It encourages that to continue.
It's also like when I used to tell people that my uncle was married to my cousin. Then you get that face that you just did, Scotty. They're like, wait, what? Different sides of the family. But sometimes when you word it in a fun and playful way, it opens the conversation.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if at least one response you ever get to that is what?
Oh, many, many times.
Would you repeat that, please?
Yeah. Yeah. They're like, wait. Isn't that illegal? I was like, nah, different sides of the family.
Yeah. See, what I would say if I was talking to you, you said that, well, I'm not sure if I heard you accurately.
If mother and father get a divorce, are they still brother and sister? Okay.
Ouch. Yes. So then how do you move forward? Once you have that, I love how this ties into the vulnerability piece that we were just talking about with Kimberly. Being vulnerable and sharing some of those deeper things requires kind of that vetting of your audience. So here with the three of us, I know that I could say something like that, and you know that I'm not saying it mean. How do you work once you know that you're saying, I want to say the right fit things for the right fit audiences? What would you do beyond that?
Well, obviously, the first thing I would do is I would do my best to have as much of an understanding as possible of what the audience wanted to hear. The other thing that I do, not that I would do this, I do this, is if I think that there's any chance at all that anything that I'm going to say might be taken either as a criticism or an insult or whatever, I always state to the person or the people that I'm talking to, I never intend to judge. I never intend to be disrespectful. My only two intentions are to say what I know and to be as helpful as possible. And that's always received very well.
Well, the way that you say that is very reassuring at the same time. You're like, I got you, and I got the needs that you have, and I'm saying this with love in this direction. And if it happens to come your direction, I am genuinely sorry.
Yeah.
And you can hear that genuine sound behind your voice. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I really believe that the main reason that that's able to be heard is because it is sincere.
It is sincere. Somebody had told me once, they're like, I don't know how you do it, but you make even the cheesy things sound not cheesy. I was like, that's because I mean it.
Yeah.
I'm not like spread love all over the world. And I actually mean let's spread love all over the world. So the things that you're saying, it's the same thing. Having that genuine understanding, not just the feeling, but the understanding behind the feeling too.
And the sensitivity to how it might be potentially received.
Yeah.
That's tough though, isn't it? Because you don't know how it's going to be received. Like that's to me the biggest challenge, because I bump into that. I'm a nutrition coach, and sometimes I'll be talking about how a certain diet doesn't work and it's ineffective and it's not helpful. This is a better way to have more balance, etc. But I might have just told somebody in their ears, the diet you're doing is stupid. Like that's not what I meant, but that might be what they hear, and I can't possibly know all of the variables.
So what do I do to help to prevent that? I always start off that part of the conversation with, I'm going to give you some information. It's up to you to decide whether you want to use it or not. What I can tell you is when I have provided this information to other people and it has been acceptable to them, it has made a difference for them. So at the very least, all I'm asking is that you be open to hearing what I'm saying, and we can talk about what you think about it afterwards.
I'm making notes.
Okay.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's a good preface. You know, one of the things I'm curious about, Alan, with the line of work that you're in, I got a couple different curiosity questions, but I'll start with this one. I know, and I have known over the years, several people who have struggled with addictions, and there's definitely a certain personality type to it. I know lots of them have been stuck in, I guess, what could only be framed as victim mentality, where the world is against me, poor me, everything's so hard. And they gravitate towards drugs and alcohol and addictions because they can't manage the world. How, like, maybe this is too hard of a question, but how do you unwrap that? How do you help people come from a place of personal accountability and choice? And because, you know, drug addictions and food addictions have some real parallels. People wrap their emotions in food. They've had a really hard, brutal day at work. They come home and they just want to bury themselves in food. And if somebody's clinically obese, like really, really like 400 or 500 pounds, and they go to a center and they drop a bunch of weight and they come home and they have a fridge full of their addiction and they're told, just have a little. Like, what can you share about all? Because that's a challenge.
Well, let me understand your question first, because I usually do my best to hear everything that someone is saying, and sometimes I'm thinking like, well, what part do I pay attention to? Yeah. So of everything that you said, which is all related,
yeah,
what specifically would you like me to
address? How do people overcome their tendency towards that addiction, whether it's drugs or food or alcohol or sex or whatever their addiction is, because there's a tendency. If there's something, and you go to a place or a thing and you temporarily get away from it, but as soon as you come back to normal, it's right there again.
So the first step in overcoming it, or the first step towards overcoming it, is wanting to.
Yeah.
The second step is believing that it's possible.
Yep.
The third step is having a way to begin to believe that it's possible. The next step, I lost count of the numbers.
3. Four.
Thank you. I thought it was 4. The next step is beginning to develop a strategy to see what happens with that strategy. And of course, what happens very often when I speak with people who have an addiction is they'll talk about how things haven't worked in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And what I basically communicate to them is, I'd like you to try something, even if you don't believe it. Do your best to only pay attention to what we're talking about now, because the past is in the past and it does not have to continue into the present.
Mm-hmm. That's huge. Yeah, that makes good sense. And that's
when people tell me like I make sense, what I always immediately say is, I like it when I make sense.
That's awesome.
Having that piece of not just saying I'm going to do it and committing to doing it, but committing to the commitment. That was my piece. It was like, yeah, I can commit today, but then having that long-term commitment was my issue. It's like I had so much resolve day 1, maybe day 2. Come day 3, you're like, I don't give a, I just want whatever it was that was bothering me. I also put a question on my mirror. I wiped it off now because I would always strive for my goals, but then I would have my fears and those fears would stop me. So I wrote this question on my mirror. It says, how can I make my dreams feel safer? Because I knew that there was that barrier of, even though they are my dreams were scary. Scary good, but still scary. So then my mind was, this is unsafe. Let's not go there. That whole tribal response thing. So
Yeah.
then how can you make your dreams or your goals feel safer, feel more familiar, and work from that space?
And you know what the real simple answer to that question is?
What?
I was hoping you'd ask.
Oh, okay. I was like, I can give you answers, but I'm pretty sure you
I was hoping you would ask. One step at a time.
Mm.
Not looking at the big picture of where you necessarily, not overly focusing on the big picture.
Yeah.
Focusing on, what do I do today? You know, there's an expression in the addiction treatment field, just for today.
Ooh, I like that.
Just for today. That's powerful.
Yeah. If I want to lose 20 pounds, like, whoa, wait, 20 pounds, that's a lot. If I want to start to lose weight, I could start to lose weight.
Yeah.
It's the way we think about things.
Mm-hmm.
Our thoughts are so powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually started switching the way I even said that. At first, I was like, I want to lose 50 pounds. And I'm down about 30 now. So yay. But I also switched it from, instead of me wanting to lose weight, I want to let go of weight. Because for me, it was really tied with my emotional well-being. The extra weight was this layer of protection. So why would I want to lose my protection? Instead, I'm ready to let go.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I have daily mindset video exactly about that. I'm a big fan of language. I do, like, because loser, awful. If you lose your wallet, you struggle till you find it again. Like, we don't want to. This lose implies something of value you're missing. We don't want to lose weight. Like, we want to get rid of that. We want to shed that. We want to release that. We want to let that go. Like, you're right. That's huge.
Yeah. And then even with the whole conversation about words, the whole finding clients, like, are they just not like hanging out around you? You have to go out searching for them. Like, you're surrounded by people. So in your work, Alan, how much conversation do you have around those words that we use every day?
Every session. Every session. It's so, and I have that conversation with myself too. Yeah. Like, if I catch myself thinking something or saying something, as soon as I become aware of it, I purposefully and intentionally change it.
Yep. So what are some of your favorite words? Because one of my favorite words right now is, I'm not saying the word stress. Instead, I'm switching that out for the word challenge.
That's the word I use.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah, that's what, when I think of stress, I think of challenge. When I think about work, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, and response to challenge.
Yes.
Right? Stress is response to challenge. And stress can be beneficial because stress can make you stronger. Like, in my world of being a coach, exercise is stress. Your body doesn't, there's no difference. It's just stress, but it's a positive stress that will create a response, and that outcome is desirable. Whereas the stress of your world collapsing around you and everything sucks, that's the different stress.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So one of the things I talk to people about in that vein is it's not a question of not having stress. It's a question of managing the stress so it doesn't become distressful.
I love that. I don't remember where I heard this, but it was talking about how stress is good, but it's not like you have to have this exact amount of stress. It's stress is a scale. I'm just going to use my screen. And if you're too low of stress, you're not motivated. You're not taking actions to do things. But yet, if there's too much stress, then you're overwhelmed and you're still not taking action. So finding that sweet spot in the middle that is right for you, depending on where you are and what task you want, that is what we're aiming for. We don't want to be too high or too low, but somewhere in the middle.
And in addition to what you just said,
Yeah.
what I explain to people about stress is that stress is only something that we have to adapt to.
Ooh.
So what you just said fits in exactly to what I say.
Yeah.
It's not a question of, oh, I don't want any stress. Because what I tell people, and sometimes they laugh, sometimes they look shocked, I say, you really do not want to have absolutely no stress in your life. Do you know why? And they would say, no, why? I said, because then you would be dead.
Exactly.
And they go, oh, really? Well, tell me more. And I do.
Of course you do.
Yeah, this whole stress-free life, there's no such thing. There's no such thing.
No.
Stress is what creates all of the good stuff, but it's how you manage that stress. And I think maybe that's the challenge in what you deal with is, and I know I grew up in a world of addictions and stuff, and how they handled stress was alcohol and smoking and all those things, right? And so it's about finding new ways to deal with stress that are productive versus destructive.
Yes.
Right.
Yep. And the addictions also, not intentionally all the time, and maybe not even often, but they're also used on a subconscious level, certainly, to deal with the effects of trauma.
Oh, yes.
And pain. Pain, basic. Trauma's pain.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember when I was addicted to video games. And I know the conversation around addiction is usually like drugs, alcohol, that kinds of thing.
It's anything.
Generally. But so then when I was addicted to video games, I didn't see it as an addiction. I did, however, see it as an escape. But I didn't realize the addiction piece until one night I had my daughter. She's 12 now. But at the time, she was just a baby and I was still breastfeeding. I saw the baby monitor. She was awake. She was a preemie. So I needed to make sure that I fed her every time she was awake. And my first thought was, I don't want to. She's interrupting my game. And I went, I don't even want to feed my own daughter. I want to play video games instead. This is an addiction, not an escape. And I quit cold turkey.
Good.
Yeah. Because I knew that still to this day, I know that if I go back to that game, that I could get sucked back in because it's one of those style games that you could play 24/7.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And actually, in terms of current language, and I can't say how far back it goes, but it probably isn't really far in the past. But what you just described is currently referred to as a process addiction, which has to do with behavior.
Yes.
So, for example, gambling.
Yes.
It's what you do.
Yes.
It's not related to a substance.
Okay. That makes sense.
And the way you described it is exactly what an addiction is. It takes over the life.
Yep. And I did notice that there was a little bit of a problem when I started skipping or wanting to skip classes. I had never skipped class. ever. And yet I wanted to skip class, and I did once or twice. But that was not the thing that stopped me. I quit for like a month, but then I went back. It was really that moment with my daughter going, I'm denying a human being their basic rights by doing this thing. This is not okay. Like, hard limit.
Yeah. See, and what you just said, in my opinion, and I'm going to phrase it differently than
Go ahead.
the way it's typically phrased,
Okay.
is exactly the point at which a person that has an addiction decides to make the change.
Yeah.
When they recognize that they're done being a slave to the addiction.
Yeah.
That's huge. When the person realizes that and said, you know what? I know I've thought this a few times, but you know what? I'm done with this. That gives them the best chance of being in recovery and staying in recovery with reasonable consistency.
Yep.
Yeah.
There was even like a TV show based off of that kind of lifestyle. And I was afraid to even watch the TV show because I was like, will that urge? Because it was probably only 2, maybe 3 years after this had happened. So it was still kind of fresh in my mind. Like, if I watch this show, have I done enough healing that I won't go back to the old habits? Because I don't want to start that spiral. But it's the same thing in my life with depression that usually happens at this time of year. I catch myself now going, you're not in the sun. You need the sun, because if you're not in the sun, we know what happens. That downward spiral happens. And come January, you are secluding yourself from everyone. Like, we're not doing that. We're not doing that. But then there's that fear of going back into those habits. So, Alan, I would love your suggestions on how maybe to think differently about that fear, or maybe a suggestion.
Okay. Well, actually,
Yeah.
perhaps, because I don't want to assume,
Yes.
you've actually just identified the solution. You use your mind to manage your emotions.
Yep.
That's the way to do it. You know, if I watch a show, it might trigger me. It may want me to go back. Okay, so wait. So will it or won't it? Okay.
Here.
Well, if there's a chance it will, what reason could I possibly have to want to take that chance? If I feel reasonably confident realistically, that's a tough one.
Yes.
But because maybe I think I can do it, but then, I'm starting to, my fingers are starting to move. I want to get a hold of that control, whatever. But then you could also have the predetermined strategy. If it starts to give you the heebie-jeebies, you shut it off immediately and you do something else.
Yeah.
That's what we call distraction.
Yeah, I talk about that in one of my daily mindset videos. It's creating a space between stimulus and response.
Yeah.
Go for a walk. Give it another day. Anything, because if the stimulus response is immediate, you could be in trouble. You need a gap, right?
Yes.
Alan, I'm fascinated by this whole world of it. And I coach people on nutrition, but if you didn't think psychology was the biggest part of it, you're not understanding nutrition. Because it's huge, because it's social, it's all of the different pieces. And I'm constantly fascinated by all manner of addiction. It doesn't matter what it is, where we comprehend that if I go out on a Tuesday night and, like, let's say I was an alcoholic. If I go out on Tuesday night and I drink till I'm stupid, and then I know I'm going to have a hangover tomorrow, I'm going to be useless. I'm probably going to either be terrible at work and get fired, or I'm going to miss work, or there's all these consequences. Or if I'm addicted to food and I eat this whole pie or this whole everything, and I know I'm going to gain weight and I'm going to be mad at myself tomorrow, and I'm going to feel like crap, and I'm going to be farting and backfiring. But we do it anyway. Like, 2 questions. Where's the disconnect? And what do we do about it? like I've been in the Tim Hortons lineup in the drive-thru, and I'm just gonna get a grilled chicken wrap because I'm eating healthy and I'm taking care of myself, and I'm just gonna get a chicken wrap. And they're like, welcome Tim Hortons, I take over. Yeah, I'd have a grilled chicken wrap, please, with no sauce. Can I get you anything else? And a large iced cap. What are you doing? Why did you just order a 500-calorie drink? You said you were not going to. Why did you just do that? So that's my question.
Okay. So in part, the disconnect is connected to habit. If you've been doing that with any regularity,
yeah,
it means that you need to have the awareness at the moment or the planning ahead of time. When I go through there, I am going to focus on only saying this. And when I'm waiting in line in the car, I'm going to practice it. I'm not only going to think it, I'm going to actually practice what I'm going to order. And when that person says, oh, good morning, good afternoon, whatever, how can I help you today? Or what would you like? What can I get for you? You only focus on that, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
So part of it's connected to habit. Part of it is connected to whatever your stress level might be at that point.
Sure.
That might in a certain sense, re-trigger that so-called need.
Yeah.
So that's where the awareness comes in. Because if I order a 500 calorie or whatever, 500 calorie drink, I can instantaneously say, wait, please, I want to change that. I don't have to allow myself to say, oh, well, I already ordered it. I guess I might as well. I don't want to be a bother to the person.
Yeah.
It's doing our best to be as consistent as possible in taking care of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that answers your question.
I think it does, and I think it really comes back to literally dendrites in the brain that have a connection, and you're in this place and you do this thing. And one of the things I say often is environment is stronger than willpower. So just don't put yourself in that environment.
Yes. I want to add to what Alan said. So the way that I've been thinking about this is you're trying to do something to fill a need. And sometimes if we're not doing the thing that we know fills the need and is the healthy way to do so, then what need am I filling that is more basic? More like survival kind of base. So if you're like, I want to go and I want to get this coffee, but I know it's not healthy for me, then what need was it filling for you to order it? Mm-hmm. Was it filling comfort? Was it filling love? Was it filling validation? It could be anything for you, but just knowing what that is will help you every single time it comes up again, so that you can go, oh, this drink actually means this for me. This is a healthier way to fill that need, and I'm choosing that, not this.
Yeah. And the one thing that goes along with what you just said, it's also a quick fix.
Oh, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I want to stop feeling this way or thinking this way as soon as possible.
Yes. Right now. Wait, yesterday. I wanted it yesterday.
Yeah. So one of the strategies that I teach people is whenever you do that, or if you can remember ever doing that, think about how you feel afterwards, or how you felt afterwards.
Regret.
And truly ask yourself a question. Do I want to feel that way again? Is that really worth whatever I get from it for the short amount of time I get from it?
Yep. You writing all that down?
I am making notes. I'm also just connecting with our next guest, but
okay. Yeah.
And I've got all kinds of notes, which is good. It fascinates me too, and I think you nailed it, Alan, is figuring out what's where does the connection come from. And I know for me, when it comes to that 500 calorie sugary caffeine drink and stuff, part of it for me is when I was a kid, when my dad would come home from work, he would bring sugary treats, and We had all kinds of struggles and whatever as kids, doesn't matter, but his way of saying I'm sorry, I love you was to bring sugary treats. So if I ever feel unloved, then that wells up, right? And it's about identifying that a large iced cappuccino is not love. It's not.
And then what makes you feel loved?
Then what makes you feel loved, and do that. And sometimes I will reach out to one of my best friends and just say, I hope you're having an amazing day, buddy, and something like that. And then whatever, right? So that's awesome. Alan, any parting words? This has been fantastic. I love what you do in the world because you are very needed to like there's a lot of people out there struggling. I think in the last couple of years, it's probably gotten a whole heck of a lot worse.
Well, if I give myself a slight plug and then a final quick word.
Please do.
Okay. So my final, not final plug, a plug is that my website, one of my websites, lifemasterywithalan.com. That's where my books are located. The ones where I'm in the compilation chapter, in a compilation book where I have chapters, and also my own book. And I also have an e-learning program. The book, my current book, is a microcosm of the e-learning program that I am marketing to addiction treatment centers and also to individuals and also to professionals. So if anyone's interested, and if you want to go on Amazon and look at the book, the name of the book is Back to Living. And you could look inside to see if the chapters could be of any help to you. My final comment is for everyone to always believe as best as you can that whatever you want that's truly realistic, it's not just absolutely bizarre, you are capable of achieving it. If you don't believe it, believe that I believe it, and operate and behave in your life like it can happen, because then it will. And when you think that way, you'll come up with ideas that you never thought you could have.
Like, I want to be a unicorn.
There you go. So you start by getting a horse.
No, usually I just would steal my daughter's pajamas, but of course they wouldn't fit because she was so small. I'd put the sleeves on, just barely, and then the hood over my head, and it had a unicorn horn.
There you go.
It was all good.
That's a huge, powerful thing, Ellen. I really appreciate that. I mean, I know for me as a coach, that's huge. If you don't believe you can, just lean into the fact that that I believe you can, and lean on that until you join me.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. One quick last little sort of thing that I think is kind of funny in a way. Sometimes when I speak with a client, the client will say, do you believe that people could change?
Oh, yes.
And my response is, if I did not believe that, I wouldn't be doing what I do.
Exactly.
That is excellent. Alan, I'm going to let you go. Our next guest is here, and I've really enjoyed our chat today. Thank you so much for all you do. I hope that people reach out to you at lifemasterywithalan.com and, keep changing the world.
Okay. And thank you both for a really, really interesting interview.
It's been a pleasure.
You're
Absolutely.
welcome.
Have a wonderful day.
Okay. Thank you. Same to both of you.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, you never know where the conversation is going to go with Scotty and I.
That is so fantastic. Well, I'm super stoked. I can't believe it once again. And I said this yesterday. It's like, wow, we're on our last guest already. Like 3 hours goes by just in a flash.
Yeah, I like that. Other than I've been sitting in a chair too much. Oh,
Yes.
I got to do more of those burpees. I have 50 more to do.
Well, speaking of amazing guests, I cannot wait to interview Vanessa Benlolo. Hello.
Hello, how are you? And thanks
Great.
for having me on today.
Of course. How you been?
I've been really well. Recovering, I was feeling a little bit sick, so if I cough, here you'll hear that. But yeah, doing amazingly, supporting my clients, and yeah, just really enjoying life as always. How about you?
So good. So good. We're having a lot of fun, as Laura and I tend to do. And so let's just start with tell us about yourself and who are you and what do you offer to the world? Let's start there.
Sure. So as you introduced, I'm Vanessa Benlolo, and I basically support clients in healing generational trauma, family and societal conditioning, and to really embody their spiritual gifts and live in alignment with their soul. So I do a lot of work with everyone of various age groups and everyone from like single people. I work with couples. I work with large families and healing like dysfunctional and generational trauma. And I also do generational healing as energy work as part of that. And so my work really stems around like being authentically expressed as who we came here on the planet to be. And so I see these like arms of my work over the years that I've been doing this, just as arms that support this journey of living, soul aligned and being authentically who we're meant to be, instead of like what society created us to be or who we thought we needed to be for our parents, or whatever other conditioning we picked up along the way, or things we came inherited with already aspects we came forward to evolve through in this lifetime, right? In this spiritual journey that we're on. And so that's kind of the breadth of my work, and all the different things I do support that journey for each of my clients that I have. Yeah.
I love that. We were talking about perfectionism earlier.
Yes.
And it made me think of some of my generational trauma, where it's not just me when I was younger, but my parents as well when they were younger, where the environment was not safe unless you performed at a certain level.
Right.
Or because that's just the way that I thought. So when I was younger, my parents would fight, and little old me didn't know, but she picked up on the fact that when I was really good, they were happier. And so there was less fighting, which meant it was safer for me. Hence perfectionism.
Absolutely, right. And like
Yeah.
trying to like earn love, right? It can lead to codependency. It can
Oh,
lead to
yeah.
trying to earn love through like performing, right? Which then we inherently then bring on shame that we carry, because it's like we're not good enough as we are. So I do a lot of work with clients around like healing shame and like ritual, but also with women in preconception, because I always say that we're all kind of born into shame, just because the very act that creates us, which is sexuality, is shamed in our society. So it's like the very act that creates who we are as beings are shamed. And so until the very day that even that aspect is healed, we all carry shame. So in a way, we can't have shame around having shame. So we can't like feel, unworthy, like have shame around feeling unworthiness. And another interesting thing too about what you said is like what I've discovered in generational healing is that some of those feelings that you have, or even some of those patterns passed on from like your parents onto you, like validating you for being a certain way. Sure, it could be their projected shame, but it could also be because some ancestor in your line needed literally, let's say, to like perform a task very well, or they were going to like be killed, right? So it's like there's all of those patterns that repeat too that are really interesting to discover. Yeah.
I did some generational healing, and I can't remember which coach it was, but I went 13 generations back and I was healing abandonment. And this story played out in my head of this boy that I went to go visit, and there was this house burning and like there was smoke everywhere. And when I was talking to him, he's like, I don't know where my parents are, but I watched his parents run from the smoke because they couldn't breathe. Then like we went up into space to heal whatever, we came back down to earth. That's when he saw his dead body in the smoke. And I'm thinking, oh my God, he didn't know he was a ghost. And like, I just cried. Then I thought I was crazy for a little bit. But I reminded myself that our subconscious mind sometimes needs to make up stuff. Sometimes it could be true, but really this is how our mind needed to see it in that moment to help us figure it out. So did you have any experiences like that? Because I'm assuming, since you talk about this work,
yes,
you've done this work.
Oh, I've done this work. Like in that session, it sounds like your guide or coach led you through a process of facilitating like the healing work for yourself.
Yes.
For me, the way that I lead in generational healing is I'm a teacher of the work as well. So I teach students, and I'm facilitating the healing. So actually, I'm inviting your ancestor into my field to guide me in facilitating the healing. And the way that we've actually discovered it's passed on, because you kind of said, hey, like, does your mind, I heard a question there, does your mind make things up to heal it in this way. Maybe in the way that it was presented, where like you kind of went back up, like that is creating more from like your subconscious mind. But the reality is we do carry the genetic imprints of these experiences in our bloodline. So the way that I work is with that. So there's a book that is really fascinating. It's called It Didn't Start With You. It's a really great book on like, it talks about the studies of how like generations down from people who survived the Holocaust, that they had very much same responses as if they had been in the Holocaust, even though they were not alive then. And so what happens, and I didn't introduce myself this way, but I also studied biological engineering. So it kind of came from that side into the spiritual work and bring the two together. And so there's the study of epigenetics, which is the study of like how genes are expressed versus like, you know, if you have a genetic sequence says like, this is my color hair, right? Like there's also aspects of our genetic imprinting that carry down basically emotional information to help us survive. And so we develop these things by experiences, like let's say that ancestor that you had like realize, oh my gosh, like I could be abandoned in this type of experience. Because I want my lineage to survive in this world that we live in, let me remember that imprinting and carry that forward so I have a greater chance of surviving. And so then what happens to us is we have not had that exact experience of that whole thing burning down, but we live our life going, wow, I have such a fear of like abandonment. And even you might not have any experience in your life of being abandoned at all, or you might also have had experiences, because those imprints then sometimes also lead to us having those experiences so that we can heal it, right? Because this is like this evolutionary journey of healing whatever our parents and our great grandparents and even like 14, 15 generations back have not healed. Like evolution is basically just focused on this healing journey. It doesn't matter who in the line heals it, but someone has to be responsible in healing it. And so it'll bring up experiences for you in your own life that you feel abandoned, to become aware of this abandonment wound and then seek the support in healing that, not only for yourself, but for your lineage as you did. And which modality people use to do that, I mean, is your own calling, like where you're drawn to. But basically that's how it shows up. And I'm working with the bloodline itself and having the energetics of what's present share with me what needs healing and how to facilitate that. Yeah.
That is so interesting that you do it that way. I've never heard that one. I've come across a lot of different healing modalities, because my favorite thing to do is find patterns in them all. I'm like, what is the root? Just tell me what the root is. But after that had happened, the first thought that I had was, I want to go search for ghost stories in my province. I'm like, is this true? I want to know if this is true, because then I could learn more about my family and where I come from. My daughter and I would talk about this stuff. And sometimes she's upset for no reason, or she'll see me healing because it's new to her. It's not something they generally talk about in schools. So when she's upset, I've told her a few times, I'm like, you need to heal it now. Waiting to heal it later could mean that if you choose to have kids, and I make sure I have that conversation, choose to have kids, and you keep this story with you, you're actually passing that on to your kid. And so I'm like, we need to have this conversation now, and to do this type of work now so that you can practice it. So when you are old enough to be on your own, you have at least built the foundational skills to start that process for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the greatest thing parents can do for their children are like teach them how to emotionally regulate, teach them how to discover their own needs and kind of respect and communicate those things. And also to witness you going through like your own journey, not like obviously having your child as like your therapist or anything, but for them to be able to witness how you handle your own emotions, how you handle what's showing up for you to heal, and for them to witness how someone does that in an emotionally mature way is really important. And I work a lot with parents too. Like I have this program called Soul Parent Spiritual Child. So it's about, It's for women in journey all the way from preconception. Some women come to work with me before even having a partner, all the way I've worked with like great grandmothers like at the end of their life, because whatever you can heal, because we are connected genetically, and that's not bound by time and space. Whatever work you actually do in healing yourself, you also heal that so that your children don't have to go through it. So it's always exciting. Yeah, when moms and dads too are doing their healing work, how deeply impactful that can be for the lineage. Yeah, so that's really beautiful.
I've got a question that
yes,
kind of, I'm sure you've dealt with this, but it throws a wrench in the whole works. So I was adopted and I have no idea who my genetic anything is. I did meet my birth mom and we were friends for a while, but she's passed away now. And she was 17 when she got pregnant, and the man was just some random, like, that's not a thing. It was like the first time she'd ever gotten together with somebody, and whoops, I'm pregnant. And okay, I guess I'm doing this by myself. So in the 60s, right? So she gave me up for adoption. So I don't have any genetic information at all.
Right. You might not know who biologically are like your parents, but the thing is, you don't have to know because you carry their DNA. So I actually have so many clients that come to me that are adopted, and I have students as well, just because there is such a deep curiosity to know, like, who is your lineage, right? And so I have a lot of people that come that are adopted, and you don't need to know any of your ancestors at all to receive generational healing the way that I facilitate, because I'm connecting to these stories and imprints that are in your genetics and in your bloodline. Whether you know who they are or not, they are part of you. So what people find who are adopted and receive healing sessions with me is that they actually discover a lot about who they are. And although, of course, people come to heal traumas, a lot of the healings also share gifts. Like sometimes, we're going through the healing, and like somebody that's come forward, one of the ancestors that's come forward. I remember this one client I had, her ancestor was showing me like this bread that he had been baking, and how he was very hesitant to like teach other people this secret ancient way of like making this historic bread that they had in this small town. And this is what came forward in the healing. He was unable to like let go of that, and or to share the wisdom of what he had to share around this bread. And he passed with the wisdom of how to make that bread. And he was like the baker in this town. And so the how to make that bread kind of died with his passing, right? And so funny enough, like I didn't know anything about her at the time. And she shared with me, she owns a restaurant, like in Blue Mountains, and she's struggling with how does she kind of begin to let other people take care of the restaurant. She wanted to actually prepare to sell it and let go of it. And she was struggling with that. And so when this healing came forward, she basically said to me, she does know her ancestors, but she said to me, look, like I literally just received this bag of flour that was passed down in my family lineage 2 days before, like two days before this healing took place. And so she knows her ancestors, but I've had other clients who don't know their ancestors and who are adopted. And like, there's aspects of in the session where they're very musical, and she's very musical. She's like, oh, that's where that comes from. Right. So not only do we discover like these traumas, kind of like that restaurant owner, hey, I really need to let go and allow others to lead this restaurant so that this can live on beyond me, kind of like her baker ancestor who couldn't do that, right? And this other, she's actually a student of mine and a facilitator now, but it's like she's got ancestors that came forward that were very musical, and she's adopted into the family that isn't musical, but she's always been like very musical. Now she realizes that comes from her father's side of the lineage. So there's so much that can be discovered, and you don't need to know who it is, because they're part of you. And we only can heal the aspects that are actually part of us through the work the way I do it. We can't heal it. Let's say you're like, hey, so I don't carry this trauma, but I'd like to heal that from my lineage. That wouldn't work in the way that I facilitate, at least. Yeah.
So what does it look like to work with you? Is it is it very like a spiritual, you close your eyes and meditate, or is it what is it, or is it discussionary, or do you actually talk to grandma and grandpa, or what does it look like?
So I have many different types of sessions, but the generational healing sessions, the way they work, I facilitate for clients all over the world. People lie down in their home. They provide me with their birth details. So they provide a photo, their birth date and their birth location, and like I have an intake form. So they submit all that and they book their time and pay for it. They lie down in their home for an hour. The healings are up to 45 minutes. I take their photo and their birth details. I smudge, I call in their ancestors. I have a massage table set up, and I connect with their ancestors through their birth details. And I facilitate the same way as when I used to do them in person. So I'm working in their etheric field, which is basically just like above and around them. I'm not touching them. I'm not working in their physical field, so not in their internal bodies, although physical things can come forward for healing as well. And so I'm moving the energy. And so what it looks like is like I'm physically moving energy above and around them. It's completely different every time. I have no idea what's going to come forward when I open up. I have no idea how I'm going to be asked to lead or facilitate it. And while I'm discovering through the energetics what took place, I say it out loud, and I do capture that on a recording. And then, so that's about an hour. And then my clients come online for 30 minutes afterwards, and I share with them what came forward to be healed. A lot of times they have sensations and experiences at a distance, no matter where they are in the world. So I connect with them to hear what their experience was on that end, and I share with them what came forward to be healed, and they will share with me how what came forward to be healed resonates with what their current experience in life is, and we'll kind of have a discussion about that, and they'll receive that recording too. So that's how those sessions work, basically.
Wow. And that all happens remotely. You're not even in the same room.
All remotely. Yeah. I used to do them all in person, and then I trained to do it at a distance, and I've been doing it at a distance for, I don't know, maybe like 3 or 4 years. And I've been doing this work for, I want to say 7 full time. So, well,
Wow.
8 full time, but 7 for generational healing. And yeah, it's just really beautiful work. I remember the first time that I facilitated, I actually went into the work just because I wanted to heal my own family lineage. But the first time that I facilitated, I have never felt so present in my body, like so, I don't know how to explain it. It's like when you can feel and sense and feel with your whole body, as opposed to, and like your mind is completely still. And it's the one experience in life that I've had where you're just completely present to the present moment, just receiving intuitively. And I think after that feeling, I kind of just got hooked to it. And I have never gone a week without doing a facilitation, except for this year, like when actually I got bitten by a dog. I got bitten by a dog and I had to get 5 stitches, and I literally couldn't move my hand. So that's like the only thing that's ever stopped me from doing this work for about a week and a half. So
That was going to be my next question. Like, what got you into this work specifically? Why not just be a healer? Why not do Reiki? Like, why generational healing?
Actually, I was trained in Reiki, but I dropped it as soon as I trained in this. I was like, this is so much like more aligned for me. But I guess long story short is like, I guess I had a somewhat traumatic childhood upbringing, which is what I think a lot of people who come to healing work have. You know, my parents were very like, my dad's Moroccan, like, well, he's passed now, but he's born in Morocco. My mom's like from Aruba. They kind of met and just like passion, and here I am, right? Like I almost was like an abortion, but I made it through. So yes, I was like, I have a mission here in life, which I definitely feel like I'm like supposed to be here at this time. I can share a lot more about that too, but basically, like, you know, my parents split afterwards, like when I was 18 months old. So having a core wound of abandonment, like yourself, and really not having family that way. And then having kind of pseudo family. Like I even used to call my uncle like I'm from Aruba, so I'd call him Theo Papi, which means like Uncle Dad, like just because I'm like trying to find replacements, right, for growing up without a father. And then my mom remarried. I moved to the US. Who she remarried was like physically abusive to her. So there was like a lot of chaos in the home and just like a lot of dysfunction, like just like watching a lot of dysfunction. And all throughout that experience, though, I came from like a very intuitive family. My godmother is a healer in the Caribbean. My family, I say they're dysfunctional, but they argue. They're not dysfunctional now. We've done a lot of healing, but they argue about who's more intuitive. So they're like, I knew that first. I knew that first. Like, so we have our own versions of like the dysfunction shows up a little bit differently. But yeah, I just went through a lot of trauma and, you know, kind of leaving, being uprooted, living in the US, not knowing English at the time, like just a lot of like change. And I remember in childhood just wishing for peace and tranquility. Like all my journals were like, I wish for peace and tranquility. And I started seeing a therapist when I was 9. And so I think just there's a lot about like fascination of like healing work. I had a lot of spiritual experiences growing up too. Like in that part where there was a lot of physical abuse my mom was enduring, I remember I had a moment like, what is the point of this life? I think I was 9, sitting on the toilet in the bathroom going like, what is the point of this? Like life, I don't like this. I don't want to do this. I was not suicidal. I was just like, what is the point of this? This is not for me. Why did I come down here? And I literally saw like an opening, a field opening up. And what I know now is star people, which I had no idea what they were, but it was like 2 outlines of very tall beings that their entire internal selves were full of stars. And they just said to me, Vanessa, this is an illusion. This thing is not real. And I was like, and then they said, it's like a video game. I got so frightened and they just like disappeared. And I never saw them again till like later when I started practicing, like connecting with them. I never saw them at all again. And I never told anybody about that experience, like until maybe like 5 years ago, because it was so frightening for me. But that experience allowed me to just kind of, you know, to make it through that time. So I had like a lot of different things happening that way, a lot of like trauma and then needing to heal and going through therapy at a young age and just being fascinated by like what makes people who they are. And always wanting to heal people. Like I wanted to like heal my grandmother's knee and heal like my other aunt got cancer, I wanted to heal that. So it's just like this merging of all these things, my spiritual gifts and my lineage, like the trauma I had experienced, and then just being curious about what makes us who we are. And that's why I was so interested in genetics and biological engineering and the psychology. So I'm kind of fascinated in that space where like the two things meet, like, or spirituality, psychology, and like genetics all meet, is kind of this space where I like to work in like, how do we heal spiritually? How do we heal and at the genetic level? Why are we here? What motivates us to do what we do? And like, and that's kind of where all that purpose work comes into.
Yeah. So, I love those questions. I asked them too. Yes. I don't remember what I was going to ask. Oh, you had mentioned spiritual gifts earlier.
Yeah.
What kind of spiritual gifts do you have?
For myself, like I can hear, see, sense, or I would say are my core main ones, and dream work. So dream work was my first spiritual gift. Yeah. I would like have dreams and the entire thing would happen. And that still happens to this day. Like I have dreams about things that are happening to people, and like I'll call them and they'll be like, I'll know like what's happening to them. And that happens all the time. Like that happened 2 days ago, happened last week. Like that's my strongest probably spiritual gift. And so the 3, being able to hear, see, and sense are strongest. Every now and then in a generational healing, I can like taste something, but that's really unusual. And I would say that is not a honed skill yet.
To taste something? Is that what you said?
Yeah. In generational healing, sometimes like, so the ancestors communicate in different ways. Like one ancestor might show me a box and that means like I'm moving, but somebody else might show me a box and means like I'm confined. So like the way this practice is very different than like something like mediumship, where you learn like a dictionary of like symbols, right? Like mediums learn like this means sudden death, or a birthday hat means it's someone's birthday. Like they basically create a dictionary and spirit learns the language with them. But in generational healing, it's not. It's like pure intuition. They're going to show you something, and that could mean something totally different for someone and totally something different for somebody else. And so you have to really sense and feel. And sometimes you'll feel a box is present, and sometimes you'll see a box is present. And in that one scenario, I had a metallic taste, but that was like, and it wasn't like a nutrition thing because I like checked that too. But yeah, it was like a metallic taste, and that ancestor was like had like a bar of metal like in their mouth. So it was just like the way they were communicating that. And sometimes like other things will be communicated, like heart racing, and I have to know the difference of like if that's my heart actually racing or if that's actually like an ancestor. And at the beginning, when I used to be nervous doing this work, I didn't know the difference. But obviously now, after doing it for so many years, I'm very calm. So anything that kind of shows up, I know is not my own. Yeah.
So I want to back up for a second. I have to admit, I Googled a couple. I was like, what is generational healing? Like we throw around the word, and I'm picking it up. I kind of got a sense of it. Like I'm feeling you, but like if we were to go back to somebody that's never heard of generational healing,
yes,
no idea what you were talking about.
Yes.
What is it? Like I've heard of Akashic records. I've learned a little bit about that. And I've like, there's so many things in the world that are powerful and amazing that we are just beginning to comprehend. And I feel like this is in that realm. So what is, for those that have never heard of it, what is generational healing?
So generational healing is healing the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual aspects that you came in like to this life with from previous generations. So what happens is this: when we pass, we don't always, or transition, whichever people believe.
Mm-hmm.
So when we transition, we basically go through like a life review. We don't heal everything we came forward to heal, and we don't learn everything we came here to learn and experience. So that continues on in those that are living to heal, right? So what happens is whatever we haven't healed ourselves has to continue on to heal, because the planet and everything is just concerned with evolution. It doesn't actually really care that much about like each step in between. And so let's say someone hasn't, let's take the abandonment wound. Let's say like someone had an experience of being abandoned by their, yep.
No, that's me.
Oh, you have an abandonment wound. Yeah. Okay. We all do. Yeah. So let's say
when I was adopted, my mom was 17 and she was sent away to the farm. Deal with that, you know, strange boy at a party. You go away and you come back when that's finished. And so she gave me up for adoption when she was 17, and I had a hiatus hernia, so I was defective. So I was in the hospital for 6 months as an infant, just left there until I was adopted. So my adoptive parents didn't get me till Christmas, till December. So I was born in June, and it took me forever and ever. I'm 53, and I figured this out when I was 51, that this has been the dominant cassette playing in the background the whole time. Everything I've ever done, all this abandonment thing, you're not good enough, you're a loser, nobody likes you, nobody loves you, nobody wants you, that has just played over and over and over and over and over again. And where I really came to terms with it, so I race ultra distance triathlon, and when I was at the World Championships, on day 2, I crashed my bicycle at 70 kilometers an hour, 42 miles an hour, and I ragdolled down the highway and nearly died. And I had enough things happen to me in racing and life where I was just about to succeed, failure, just about to succeed, failure. And I was like, what in blazes is going on? Am I doing this? Like, am I pulling the rug out from under my own feet? What's going on here? And because there was just algae on the bridge deck. I'm okay, but there's 40 people in the race. How come I found the algae? Like, why? What am I doing here? Because I'm creating this. And then I started to explore that. And I went with a fellow that really went into that deep state of like, well, when you were a baby for 6 months, you screamed and nobody came, and you screamed and nobody came. And that changes how your brain wires. And so, but to me, it's like a one-off. That's just my lifespan. But you're saying, no, that's been carried on. So how can you tell me a bit about that? I know I'm being really selfish.
Yeah, no, I love this. I'm like, yes, tell me the life story. I love it.
Case example.
Well, there's I'm going to approach it from two places, like in the ways that I work with people. So I'll share the generational healing part later, because I want to address like what's like obviously happening in this life. As you know, like through a lot of work of like attachment theory, right? Like in that first 0 to 2 years of age is when we attach to our caregivers, and we learn like what that is. We learn about who we are through the reflections of our caregivers, right? So if you are crying because you have needs to be held as an infant, and that need is not being met, you might eventually learn that, hey, like I'm actually not going to express my needs, right? That could be a way that it shows up. Or I'm not loved, I am abandoned, I will be left, or I'm undeserving of true like enjoyment, love, and bliss, let's say, because then you're like, oh, I'm just about to, like win this thing or do this thing. Like I heard you say, like just right at the edge, it's like, no, I'm not like worthy of that, basically, right? And that can come from the abandonment wound, or it can come from just not being met and like almost being more afraid of having that thing that we so deeply desire than than not. So it's like we want that, but no, what would it be if we actually had a caregiver? It's almost more frightening. What if a caregiver like actually came and like loved me? So what if I actually won this title? Oh no, like I'm just kind of like petrified of even receiving that, even though we say we want that, or even we're working towards it, right? So there's aspects in your own life that would continue to repeat until at 51, you're like, I'm noticing a pattern now in this life. Is there an aspect of myself? And it's evolution does that. So you can kind of go, why is this repeating even solely in your own life, right? To go back and heal that. And it will continue to repeat that pattern until you can heal that for yourself, until you notice it. Now, let's say you heal that for your life. Let's say you even did, like, you're like, yep, found out at 51, worked really diligently at it, looked at like core wounds and how to reprogram them at the subconscious mind level, which I also do with clients. Or like you're like, yep, I understand it from the attachment theory perspective, and now I know how to express my needs and state my boundaries and all that, right? So let's say you've got that part like down. Now what I'm saying in terms of generational healing is you don't know your ancestry specifically from your conscious mind, right? But I would not be surprised if you had other multiple ancestors in your generational line that also experienced either abandonment and I can't tell you exactly what it is unless we did a healing session, but it's like, it could be abandonment, it could be left, it could be also that they received something and that was taken from them, right? Because that could also lead to some of the patterns that you're talking about. And so, yes, those things were not healed by other people in your lineage, and it began way before it even began with you. And that's how it repeats as well. And you're like, why did I come into this experience for the first 6 months to kind of like be left there? And usually our purpose of like, we're coming into that, it's like usually to experience the exact opposite of like what we came into experiencing at first. So my question to you is, after having like looked at that pattern, what did you kind of like move through for yourself to shift that? And yeah, what did you move through to shift that? And do you know how that ties to your life purpose? Like, I'm curious to hear from you about that. Yeah.
I feel like it's still a process. When I discovered it was, so I crashed in 2015, a whole bunch of surgeries and everything. And then in 2018, I was climbing back to get to the world championships again. And everything was going well. I'd had shoulder surgeries, arm surgeries, had all the broken bones rebuilt, had my knee rebuilt, had all that stuff done. I was getting back into training again. I was going back to the world championships, and I was at training camp in Arizona. And part of it was a neurology thing from the brain injury I got from the crash, but I tripped while running down a mountainside, and I put my hands down and I dislocated and gloved a couple fingers to the bone. And it's like, really? Again? Like we were just getting good. And I was, my awareness was in the moment when I tripped, I was talking to my coach and another couple of elite athletes and thinking, I'm not good enough to be running with these people. Who do you think you are? That's what was going on in my head when I tripped. And I was like, there's something here. And so I started asking questions and finding and looking, and I found a fella in Germany. Actually, I flew to him and I did vegetative training, which is breath work. It's like trauma release experience, that whole kind of thing. We did all kinds of work. It was amazing. What changed for me was from that point forward, I kind of was able to release a lot of that junk. And then I began to race because I loved it and because I enjoyed it, not because I was trying to prove something or be good enough or attain something. I was doing it just because I loved it. I had a whole different race experience. It was completely different. And as it's manifested through there, like in 2020, I owned a 15,000 square foot gym with 27 staff and 900 members and all that kind of stuff. And then COVID hit and they shut us down. Within 2 days, I went from, I'm going to fight, I'm going to dig in, I'm going to suffer to, oh, you don't need to do that. Let it go. And I let it go. I sold off all my equipment, paid off all my debts. I paid off all my staff, and I started over. And now I get to coach people from a place of love and caring, and I get to help people and make a difference in people's lives. It's great. And I still think there's still that cassette tape playing because I'm just successful enough. Like just successful enough. I've had people tell me, Coach, your 21-day program is a miracle. It's amazing. I love it. It's changed my life. It's great. But it's fascinating because you have 20 or 30 people a month. And this other person I've heard of has 5,000 people in her group, and her program's not nearly as good as yours. Like somehow I keep holding myself back. So I'm really curious about exploring further. So as usual with these stupid amplifier message, I have to
it's interesting though. I'm hearing like a theme of like the external like needing to define, right? Because it's like, who says that that person who has 5,000 people in their group, and let's say you have like 20 or 30, that they're more successful in that? That doesn't mean that, right? And the same is like, okay, so you're left at childhood for those first 6 months without a caregiver. That doesn't exactly like define how lovable you are. Like that doesn't define, you know, like, and what I heard you say there when you were saying like, hey, I'd gone back to competing from like a place of just loving it. And I think when we really work at, and I do this with clients, is like work at the deconstructing of the conditioning. It's like you realize that exactly what's meant for you is exactly what shows up. So the reason why I'd asked you that question in terms of like, how's it connected to your life purpose, is because a lot of times these traumas too, like show up and they're like redirecting us. And it's like, okay, so COVID shut down your gym, you're running, and it literally made you aware of, as you're running, I'm not as good enough as these and these people. It's like, that's going to continue to show it to you until you stop to kind of realize that's just different than I am. It's not per se more successful. It's not better. And people might say to you, hey, your program's really great. It's like, that program that you're leading is exactly perfect for exactly those 30 people. And it's like, you know, for yourself, like, if you're looking at success, it's like, what's the measure of success? Success is like, for myself, is measured through how present am I? Do I feel that I'm supporting people in making the transformations that are right for them? And it's not even really about me, right? So I think part of what I'm hearing there is like not being defined by the external circumstances for you, and knowing that like you're exactly where you need to be, is exactly loved, even if like your mom wasn't there, or it's like, these are not the external things that you need to look at anymore. And it's like, if you are being invited and like to work with more people, because that's an inner calling, as opposed to like, hey, they have 3,000 or 5,000 people, then, you know, pursue that, open that up, and just ask your ancestors, actually. Ask your ancestors, you know, bring me those that I'm meant to deeply serve. And if I'm meant to serve in like a different context, reveal that to me as well.
When I will, so I'll just finish off with me, but thank you so much. I will say that them having 5,000 people, to me, that's not like a success measure. It's well, they could probably pay bills a little easier than I can. That's just that, right? Like I'm still in a place of just squeaking by.
Right.
I love that I get to love what I do. Like I love that I get to help my clients and be there for them and help them and coach them and make a difference in life. I'm sure just like you, and I know just like Laura. And gosh, it would be nice if I got paid well enough that I wasn't so stressed trying to pay the freaking gas bill every month. So,
yep. And
right?
that's fair. Mm-hmm.
That's holding me back too. So this is great. And you know what, Vanessa, we're going to unpack later because I'm totally going to find out. And this is my next, how do I hire you? How do I work with you? Tell me, right? Because I'm in. How do I work with you?
Okay. So the best place to go is my website. So that's www.vanessabenlolo, as you see my name on the screen.com. I always say to everyone, just book a consult. It's a 30-minute consult. It's free. If people want to book a generational healing session, that they can just book right off of the generational healing. It's under Work With Me. All of my offerings currently right now are under Work With Me. I'm currently updating my website. So there'll be some offerings I've been doing for years privately, but not having it publicly that people can do with me. So somatic energy healing is one of them. The couple sessions that I've been doing for the last 4 years will be available publicly now that I've been doing it for long enough privately to release that. So all that's going to be coming, but the best way is to just go to my website, read about it, book a consult, and in the Soul Speak sessions and in the Soul Parent work, those are like personalized programs for everybody that I literally design by what I receive in the consult that they do with me of what is being asked to work with and what is being asked to be healed. And then if it's generational healing, you could just book it and we can start whenever you want. So that's the best way to reach me. Yes.
I want to say that it feels to me like this, and tell me if I'm right. I feel like you like a person is a Ferrari and they have all this potential, but there's a parachute. And you cut the parachute off. Like, is that true?
It is. It's kind of like you have something like dragging you and you don't understand why, and maybe you don't know why it's coming generationally or from societal conditioning or different things. And you're really just wanting to be like your best, most authentically expressed person. I help people from everything from like families to like starting their businesses. Like people have come to me for so many different things and they're like, well, aren't those things not related? I'm like, nope, they're all related because it all just comes down to like limiting beliefs, like generational trauma, conditioning, and we just like unpack it all. So whether you do it so that it helps you in your business, or do it because it helps you in your family, or you do it for your personal reasons. I have a lot of like therapists that see me, coaches, healers, entrepreneurs. I have supermodels. I have like billionaires. Like I've got like the gamut, like construction workers. It doesn't matter. People come to me from different walks of life who are really just wanting to break the cycles, like kind of like the parachute, right? To break the cycles of what's holding them back when they don't know what that is even sometimes. And and that's what I help people with, is to just be their authentic selves. So yes.
That's so awesome.
Unpack the baggage. Unpack the baggage.
Yes. Well, it's been, just like a real honor to connect with both of you today and for having me on the show.
It's been so great to have you on Blue Talks Amplify Your Message and to really amplify your message. I know Laura does this. When this recording, I share it. I put it out. Corey puts it out to thousands of places. I love that we're amplifying your message and you have such a great message. And I love, like, come on, Ferraris, let's cut the parachute off.
Let's cut the parachute. Exactly. It is. And like a lot of people that come to me too are actually like highly successful in like the earthly realms of like, or what it appears to be. Some are just starting to, but like a lot of them still struggle. It's like, that's why it's that external thing. It's like, no matter what the external is, if we're really still experiencing these same feelings, same traumas, same patterns, it makes it really difficult for us to kind of move forward. And at every level, we just will experience those in another way and in another way and in another way. And we get to unpack that and discover that and create, happy families, happy relationships. Because really the reason why I do the work, more importantly than anything, is I'm here to support humanity in their evolution. I see myself as like I work for the universe, I work for Mother Earth, and I'm just a vehicle through which she gets to support like humanity and support us along our journey here. So there's a lot more to that, and you know why I'm here on the planet, but also helping people to understand why they're here on the planet at this time, and making decisions in their life that support them to follow like their authentic self, as opposed to just like what they think they should be doing, really.
This has
Thank
been
you.
so awesome.
Oh, thank you. Lots of blessings, and I hope you guys have a beautiful day. And anyone
you
else
so
who's
much.
listening.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Vanessa.
You're welcome.
I'll let you go. Have an amazing day. Keep changing the world. Keep cutting parachutes.
I will. Okay. Blessings. Bye.
Bye-bye. Oh, that was
Thank
amazing.
you. Day 2.
Yeah. What another crazy. You know, I've almost come to a place, I'm not going to say of fear of being co-host with you on the Amplifier.
Because you're like, I want to work with all of you. Just
I know. It's
all of
like,
you.
oh, I really want to connect with like it's like holy cow, Asaki Jones. And I will tell you that was it in the early, so this is our third Blue Talks Amplifier message this year. I think our first one is in February, and then we did one kind of summerish, and then now we're this one. I think in the first one early this year, we worked with Dr. Amy Novotny, who's a doctor of physiotherapy. I'm working with her now, but it took me 10 months to save up the money to hire her to work with me one-on-one. I actually have a session with her in an hour. I'm really excited.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, she's been working with me and creating profound differences, and not only improvements personally, but that I'm passing on to my clients about breathing and posture and structure and connection and learning things and dispelling things and confirming stuff. And it's wonderful. And I love opening to these people that are doing such crazy great work. It's wonderful.
Oh, I know. There's so many people where I'm like, it's also eye-opening to have these conversations, because old version of me would come into these conversations and go, I don't really know anything. Do I really have anything to add other than my curiosity? But this version of me is like, dang, I am speaking most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time I'm like, I can speak their language. I can understand the ins and outs, paraphrase it in different ways, give context. And I'm comparing myself to myself and saying, I have come a long way from that person to
That's
who
right.
I am today.
Yes.
Celebrate.
We have. And you know, I say that to my clients all the time. It's about progress, not perfection. Like forward is a pace.
Yes.
Just a little nudge forward. There's a great book called Atomic Habits, and they talk about that 1%.
Habit stacking.
1% improvement over time is phenomenal. And I love that we've had a real diversity of speakers today, which is so much fun. 3 more days to go. Lots of exciting people to come tomorrow. I'm super stoked. We should wrap it up, but it has been, as usual, spectacular co-hosting with you. I
I
love.
want to say one thing before we go.
Yeah.
We were talking about habit stacking and atomic habits.
Yeah.
The 21-day nutrition reset with you. I have done elimination diets, which are much more stringent than what you have for us. Much more stringent. And I've done those multiple times. I have made shifts in my life, drastic shifts, to figure things out. So many times that doing something like the 21-day nutrition reset, and if you haven't gotten it, I highly suggest it, is so easy for me now. It's just tweak a couple things and stick to it. Tweak a couple things and stick to it. And then the 3,000 burpees by Christmas. I do have to say that when I started, I was on a foam roller. I was on my hands and knees on the floor and just moving my legs in and out with the foam roller, and then climbing up the couch so I could lift my arms. Like that was the extent of it. Yesterday, I was doing burpees with my hands on the floor to plank, but then I'd have to go down to my knees.
Sure.
Huge improvements. With
Absolutely.
these little changes that you're doing. So no matter what goals you have right now, if it's amplifying your message, if it's health and wellness, if it's your stories, start taking those actions today, like in the next 5 minutes, whatever it is you can get done to get yourself started.
It's
And then
those
join us
little, yeah, it's those little improvements. And that's all that this is about. It's about how can we make little improvements. And I love that we get to share this. I cannot wait to see you again tomorrow, 10 a.m. Mountain Standard Time, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and 1 p.m. way out there in Nova Scotia.
In Nova Scotia there, bye.
In Nova Scotia there, bye. So wherever you are. Oh, I guess if you're in the West Coast too, 9 a.m. Pacific time. So I hope to see everybody tomorrow. Thank you so much for being here today. And we'll end the broadcast now on a happy note with another amazing guest, and we will see you tomorrow.
Okay. Bye. Bye, everyone.